Redditors who gave up pursuing their dream to settle for a more secure or comfortable life. How did it turn out, and do you regret your decision? I just had this conversation the other day. My last job was working as an engineer for a design build contractor making resorts in the Caribbean. On paper, that sounds like a dream, but it was awful. I was working at least 3 jobs worth of responsibilities, constantly having to work late, teaching myself new disciplines in my free time so I could do design work I had no prior experience in. It was demanding as hell, and my mental health took a big toll. I found very little energy left over after my workdays. Well, COVID blessed me with the layoff and an evacuation back to America. I took up a cushy government job with great benefits and average pay. My family keeps saying I'll get bored of it, considering how exciting and challenging my last job was compared to this stuff. I had to explain that I don't mind getting bored with work. Work will always be something that sucks. I will never, ever like working. But if I can land a job that makes me bored instead of exhausted and overstressed, then I can at least have the energy to make my free time more interesting. I'd so much rather spend my energy, creativity, and determination on myself than on behalf of some company's owners and clients. Story 2. At age 15, I started playing guitar in a band. The dream was to become a rock star. At age 22, I was playing Gazzarri's on the Sunset Strip, a set of original tunes and club where so many famous people started. It was the heyday of the metal scene, and that was happening in Los Angeles. By 1984, I realized that it was just not a question of being a great band, or writing great songs. I had seen a lot of great bands in Los Angeles that had great songs go absolutely nowhere. Then, really crappy bands, I won't mention names to avoid hurting anyone, that did have commercial success. So why was this? It turns out, being a great band that writes great songs is just not enough. You also have to be incredibly lucky. More people win the lottery than become famous rock stars. It was time to get real. I was 22 and I wanted things, so I gave up my dreams and became an electrical apprentice. By the time I was 24, I was running jobs. At 27, I was accepted into the IBEW as a journeyman electrician. After passing the journeyman block test, accepted in a lot of states. At age 31, I became a master electrician and general foreman in the IBEW. I then became a superintendent of a large union shop. And finally, at age 33, I started my own electrical contracting business. At age 41, I became 100% disabled and was forced to retire. That was almost 20 years ago. I still have my Bray amp and my Les Paul in my bedroom, always plugged in, so I can pick it up anytime I want. So I'd say everything turned out okay for me. Edit. I want to thank everyone that replied. I can't possibly answer everyone, but I will answer a few of the most common questions. First, I was not hurt on the job. I have fibromyalgia. It started in 1986 and slowly took over, until 2002 when my doctor told me I was not returning to work. The major symptoms of fibromyalgia are chronic pain and chronic fatigue. I thought I was just overworked and needed a break, but it was not to be. Forced retirement was a very difficult thing because I got a lot of my self-esteem from my job. I also made a lot of money. Playing guitar definitely was an important part of adjusting to not working. I don't have any recordings left. Most of them were stolen in a box that contained guitar pedals that were stolen out of my garage in the mid-80s. My brother still has some reel-to-reel-to-reel 4-track recordings, but doesn't have a 4-track player to play them or mix them down. And also, it was nice to see how many of you have had similar experiences to me. Very uplifting to hear from you all. Story 3. I left after half a PhD in English. I think the moment I checked out was watching my tiny 76-year-old professor totter home from the office at 10 p.m. She had probably taken a 16-hour workday. You mean I have to work this hard only to earn the privilege of working that hard? I thought to myself. That, and the fact that the work was colonizing every waking hour and that I was not coping in healthy ways. I still miss lots of things about it. I made some of my very best friends in graduate school, and I felt like I was part of a community. Now, I often feel like I'm wasting my life making someone else money. On the other hand, I've been able to travel all over the world thanks to the income I get. I'm married, own my own home, and I just had my first child, so things are very, very good. Maybe one day I'll find work that is fulfilling. Edit. I did not expect this to blow up like it did. I'm trying to reply to people, and I appreciate the support a lot of you have offered. I'm going to quickly address the common questions. I work as a technical writer, which is a career path I can definitely recommend for those who went down down the same path I did. Many are asking for friends and relatives studying English, and regardless of whether they pursue the career, studying technical writing will improve concision, audience analysis, and clarity. I cannot recommend it enough. Many ask if a PhD in the humanities is worth it. No one can tell you that, of course, but I'll lay out my thinking, in case it's helpful. I work with some 23-year-olds, and sometimes I think, gosh, wouldn't it be great if I had started such a good job so early in life? At that time, I was 27 or so. Upon reflection, I feel just the opposite. I got to study something I really, truly love for a time. I developed knowledge that's critical to my personality and political perspective. I'm immensely grateful for that. On the other hand, there is a tremendous amount of suffering packed into those years, and I will bear the scars of some of that pain until I die. I'm now something of a hybrid, obviously not quite just a regular guy, on account of my annoying, enigmatical musings and distracted air. These are not traits I'm proud of, to be honest. My wife would say that I've gotten much better over the years, though. None of that is helpful for whether you should study for a PhD, but that's sort of what I'm going for. Maybe some of that will help some poor academic aspirant think through their decision. There are lots of people asking what my prof was doing, / why was she working like that if she has a tenure. While she certainly could rest on her laurels, the fact is that earning and maintaining a TT job at a top 20 program requires publication of a book every couple years, as well as an article once or twice a year. Worse, it's a total time sink. When you're doing this kind of work, every moment is a I could be working moment. Story 4. Turned out great, just not right at the moment as I'm still job hunting after having to quit my previous job. Still no regrets though. I went to college to become a 3D animator, something I always dreamed about. I was on top of the class, constantly won awards for my work. I honestly thought I was going to make it big. Then the final semester started and all of the seniors were required to go to a special hiring event where tons of big names would be. I got my portfolio and resume copies ready to go and spent hours researching the big names and their projects, as well as rehearsing lots of practice questions. It was devastating. No one would look twice at my stuff. Introduced myself, made some awkward small talk as they were so disinterested. Then, as I walked away, they would immediately put in the stack of hundreds of other portfolios and not in the special pile. I switched up my game. I started introducing myself with a quick mention that I had a background in programming. I did, thinking that maybe that would give me an edge. Oh boy, did it work. Suddenly, I was getting personal business cards, phone numbers, and emails. My resume was put on the special pile. It was at that moment I realized I went into the wrong field. I was just a tiny, insignificant drop in a sea of artists, many of whom were much more talented than I could ever be. Finished up my degree and went back to college for a BS in computer science. Got my first job right out of college from an internship I did over the summer. The job itself was heaven, and I really enjoyed it. It also helped that I made bank when I was there, paid off all my school loans within 3 years, and had plenty to invest and put into savings. While it sucks not having anything right now, I'm hoping to find something soon. Side note, the 3D stuff I still do as a hobby. Not nearly as good as I once was, but it's still fun and relaxing. Story 5. Honestly, turned out great. I realized my band wasn't going to get a record deal after a few years, and then after playing for other people's bands for a while, it started to become less fun. I got a proper job, started working on my career, and used my new spare time to start playing rugby again. Now I've got a really good job in a sector I enjoy working in, married, kids, nice house, all that stuff, and I still play rugby on Saturdays, pre-pandemic, to keep things a little different as well as keeping in shape. I don't really see it as giving up on my dream. It was just recognizing that it wasn't going to happen. I'm very fond of that period of my life, and having spent quite a few years chasing that particular dream, I don't have any regrets or what-ifs about being in a band. So I think a common theme that we're going to see across these stories is that trying and realizing that it's not your thing is a heck of a lot better than dreaming about it and never trying in the first place. So shout out to these folks that are actually giving it a shot before pivoting to something else in their lives. Story 6. Part of me regretted it. Part of me knew I had to. I always wanted to be a doctor. No pushy parents or anything like that. I just wanted to fix problems, and medical things seemed like the most interesting problems. Things change, get worse / better, add new problems. My little brother was born and developed seizures and development issues. I decided pediatrics was for me. The same problems / puzzles, but with the added intrigue of the patient being unable to tell me what was wrong. Sounds a bit sick, but that's what my brain wanted. I didn't get the grades at school. Unfortunately, my stepdad died and it messed me up a bit, being needed at home with my siblings, and I shifted my focus. I did go to university, did an access course in a biology degree with the aim of then going on to medicine afterwards. Sadly, I got 2 rejections for med school, on my birthday no less, and I pissed away the rest of my final year, because what was the point anymore? Then I met a boy, now husband, and needed to get a job. Any job. Please, just give me a job. Countless applications were ignored or rejected. I felt worse than useless. I finally landed a job at a call center. Hated every minute of it. But bills got paid. A wedding and honeymoon have been paid for, and we bought our house. But in 2019, I knew I was turning 30 soon and knew this wasn't what I wanted, even if it was what I needed. I enrolled at a local college on an access course, and last year I passed with distinction. I applied to a few university courses, and I had 2 successful interviews. I quit my sucky job on New Year's after nearly 6 years of hating it, and in 2 weeks I start my course to become a nurse. Plans change. Needs must. But I'm hoping it's worked out. Story 7. I made a solid run at becoming a writer. It was always my dream, as I've been an avid reader my whole life and have always had an active imagination. I studied English in university, read everything I could, and spent my 20s living and traveling overseas. I joined writers groups, did an apprenticeship with an established author, and worked my ass off for years, both abroad and when I returned home. I even got a few short stories published, and I was miserable. Writing fiction has to be the worst paying job in the world when you factor in the time you put in. Stephen King references this at the start of On Writing. Writers like King are extreme outliers, and even he had to work a 9 to 5 while writing Carrie. It's extremely hard to grind out a job all day, then come home and try to write all evening, or get up at 5 a.m. every day and write before work. Not only is it difficult to conjure up the juice you need to write when you're working around a regular life schedule, but everything else in your life slips. You don't have time to work out. You miss out on spending time with friends and family. You're sitting in your desk or chair every night while your partner's watching TV alone. And if you have kids, good luck. I became overweight, depressed, and miserable. I developed back issues from spending 12 plus hours a day in a chair. I wasn't getting anywhere in life, and while it was nice to get published the odd time, I didn't find the joy in my own writing in the way I do in others, so I let it go. Now I have a great job, nice house, and lots of time to spend with my wife and pursue my hobbies. I fixed my back issues and got in great shape until COVID, and I've grown so much as a person since then, so no regrets. I do think about it from time to time, though. I still read a lot, and I'm sure that itch will come back sometime. It's not like being an athlete. Nothing to say I can't pick it back up any other time. Edit. Wow. Thanks for all these awesome comments. A lot of people asking me how I fixed my back, lol, so here it is. Mine started with a soreness and the tingling down my leg. I had a couple bad episodes, which I now know was the result of a compressed disc. This would eventually devolve into a full-blown herniated discs of my L4 and L5. Seriously, it was awful. One of the worst times of my life. The pain was excruciating and debilitating. I couldn't drive, and I slept on my living room floor for months. Work was awful, even with a stand-up desk, and I had no quality of life. Whether you're trying to heal a disc or prevent it before getting that bad, this is what I recommend. The key is in decompressing and strengthening. You have to focus everything on those 2 things. Take pressure off your back by losing weight. I used a ketogenic diet. This also helped mitigate inflammation. Get an inversion table. I got a cheap one off of Amazon with a Prime membership. The shipping was free. I use mine every day. I did decompression therapy with a PT, though once we went too far on the machine and it actually made it far worse for a few weeks. Yoga and other stretching exercises. And work on strengthening. At my worst, I took a reduced schedule from work and went to the YMCA every day. I worked with a trainer to do very basic strengthening poses and worked my way up. I also got in the hot tub and sauna every day. I progressed slowly to doing more body weight, yoga, Pilates, and low-intensity strength training, focusing on the back, butt, glutea, and hamstring chain. Seriously, I totally rebuilt this part of my body, going from mushy soft to hard muscle and buns of steel. I remember vividly my wife giving me a butt tap one day, going, "Oh, that's when it sunk in how effective I've been at this." Gave it time to heal. Use all the weapons you can, but go slow. Definitely use CBD and really watch your diet. This is huge to help reduce inflammation. It was a lot of hard work, but I did it and avoided surgery. By the time my turn came, I was healed. Thanks for the delay, Canadian healthcare. In all, this was an 8-month process. As for other medical, I was on painkillers at the beginning. I tried to avoid them, but I was in an insane amount of daily pain and eventually gave in. I was very careful and controlled though, and gave it up as soon as my pain started to subside. Obviously, you have to be extremely careful with these or force yourself to avoid them altogether if you can. I also never got the cortisol shot. Being in Canada, the wait times are ridiculous, so by the time it was offered, I didn't need it. But the moral of this story is you can totally fix yourself, even something as severe as a herniated disc, with hard and meticulous work. You have to be motivated by the desire to not become a lifelong victim to your back pain, as I was. Story 8. I was a child actor. I was relatively successful. I was on a popular soap and even had my 15 minutes of fame. I had TV shows and films and commercials on the go. Of course, this meant I was bullied at school. If I answered their incessant questions about what it was like on set, they said I was stuck up for talking about myself. If I didn't answer their questions, they said I was stuck up for not engaging with them. I was talked down to, ignored, laughed at, the usual high school stuff. But for most people, that stuff ends in high school. For famous people, it never ends, as we see on the internet daily. Then I met someone on set who told me what it was really like. That if you're not made for it, the fame part can completely destroy you as a person. If you're private or shy or anxious as I am, it can tear you apart inside, and it's constant. And for the really famous people, it never ever goes away. She helped me recognize that what I loved was the process, the on-set family, the job itself. The recognition, the total lack of privacy, and the inevitable bullying just wasn't what I wanted my life to be. She showed me that at this early stage of my career, I could make my choice. I didn't have to just stumble into a lifestyle I wouldn't easily be able to get out of. She showed me the truth, that for most people, by the time they know they hate the lifestyle, it's already too late. When I was 18, I quit my agency and never looked back. Now, 19 years later, in my office job in finance, I make a fraction of what I could have made, and I don't enjoy my work nearly as much as I enjoy TV and film sets, but I'm anonymous and I'm happy. The girl I met, these days she can't even go into a grocery store or a patrol station without being mobbed. We're not still in touch, but I follow her career. Me, I can go anywhere and do anything without anyone giving me a second glance. That makes me happy. I hope she's happy too. Story 9. It's not a fancy dream like most here, but I dreamed of opening a childcare center, daycare, for low-income families back where I grew up. Went to school for early childhood education, took specialized courses in child care administration, worked as a teacher for a while in daycare and private kindergarten. In that time, got pregnant with my daughter and was making so little money due to childcare costs, even with the employee discount, that I left for an office job. Never completed my bachelor's, let alone my master's degree that's usually needed to be a daycare director in my state. Slowly climbed the ladder in office roles, making 1% more than my teacher wages, then 2, then 5, then 100, then 250, then 350, then 400, then more and climbing. As a friggin' recruiter, a boring, non-creative, emotionally unfulfilling role that helps candidates but exists to serve the company. I do some training on the corporate level, and I get to train in other areas, such as my improv community team that I'm a part of, so I do have creative outlets. But a part of my heart will always want to be a daycare director. I still doodle my dream center layout. I browse inventory catalogs and look at current staffing costs. I check out every center that I drive by, but knowing that I'd be doing a difficult job for less than 1/3 of what I make now, as a center director, no, can't do it. Can't unalive myself to help someone else. Did that my entire life. Gotta worry about me now. Edit. All the comments you're leaving are really nice and appreciated. I posted here because I thought it might be an interesting perspective to show that somebody can be happy outside of their career despite it not being their dream job. I absolutely love the company that I work for, and I think it would take a miracle, or firing me, to get me to leave that company. It's the first place I've ever worked where they truly, entirely love their employees and treat them very, very well. While I do miss the optimism of working in the childcare industry, I don't miss the living hand to mouth. Currently, the highest paying daycare director job within 50 miles of my home pays $25,000 less than I make now. That's a massive pay cut. I would need at least 4, probably 6 years of college at a minimum in order to move forward, not to mention capital. I can't imagine going back to school and spending what would be more than 3 years of my salary as a daycare director to get a degree in a field that pays significantly less than I'm currently making without a degree. I can't put my family's financial stability at risk like that. That would set us back literally a decade at minimum. So while it sucks to let go of this dream, doing a job that heartily pays my bills allows me to invest in my hobbies. I'm a part of an improv comedy team that's been wildly successful in our area. I'm on 2 awesome podcasts, and outside of a pandemic, I get to teach improv to adults and children. I'm still a teacher. I'm still a facilitator and a director. I'm very happy, and unlike when I worked in childcare, I can actually afford to go on vacations and take days off of work. So I say, if you need to, ditch the dream to find a job that funds your other dreams. That's where I'm at, and I'm happy. Story 10. I went from being a pro musician, signed to a label, to working IT security. I make great money, but I'm kind of miserable. I go back and forth, mostly regret. COVID has given me a strange new perspective on what is and isn't worth pursuing in life. I was a former professional musician in my late teens to mid-20s. Got the degree, started a band, worked our asses off, and got signed to a label that later became notorious for ripping bands off. Name rhymes with prick story bread chords. I toured the country, played in front of thousands of people, recorded a couple of kick-ass albums, and played gigs several days a week for nearly a decade of my life. Problem was that the entire time, I didn't make a effing nickel. I was broke all the time. I didn't officially move out of my parents' house completely until I was 24. I had apartments and roommate situations, sure, but for many years, I had to have my safety net from my mom and stepdad, which is embarrassing. I remember the day I decided to quit the band I was in. We drove 12 plus hours to Atlanta for a music festival, only to be told on arrival that we were bumped from the bill. Not only that, but the promoter, aka A-hole, decided to compensate us with a measly $100 for our inconvenience. $100 split among 5 dudes. It wasn't worth the hard work anymore, living in a van and eating gas station food and military rations to survive. I quit the band not long after. Long story short, I transitioned to IT. I make 6 figures, own a house, have a wife, and a top-of-the-line Nissan Armada Platinum in my driveway, and frankly, I couldn't be more miserable if I tried. I constantly get crap shoveled in my face. Chingpar, fix this. Chingpar, what's the status on this situation? Chingpar, sorry if you're on your honeymoon, but dog crap software just went down and we need your help. Chingpar, you aren't professional enough. You need to work on your communication. Chingpar, good job getting all your work done without ever needing help. You're super good at your job, but it isn't quite enough for us. You need to be perfect. Chingpar, you did 99% of your job perfectly, but didn't send an email fast enough. You're useless. Sorry, got lost in the rant, but my point stands. I'm half tempted to move to Vegas and work as a hired gun in a casino band. Those a-holes make money hand over fist playing covers from the 80s. Story 11. It went extremely well. Initially trained wanting to be an actor. Got accepted into a company touring around Europe, but then decided it would set me down a path that would most likely not work out. Chose instead to take a more secure route to study physics, which I also enjoyed. I had great ambitions to become a professor, but that dream quickly died partway through my PhD. Worst years of my life of workplace bullying, stress, and eventual depression. I have no regrets about leaving after I passed the defense. Went on to leave academia to get a job in data science within the financial/insurance sector. It's far from a fulfilling career, but is secure and pays well. It gives me the freedom to live my life comfortably and have recently been able to afford a house as a direct result of my career choice. I'm happy now. I sometimes wonder how my life would have turned out had I chosen a different path, but realistically, I don't think things could have turned out much better than they have now. Maybe I'll try a new passion once I'm more financially secure. We'll see. Story 12. Worked out well for me. I was a professional poker player in my early 20s. Not the cool guys you see on TV. Picture a guy in a dark room dispassionately clicking between 4 screens of low limit, looking like he hasn't showered in 3 days because he hasn't showered in 3 days. That description sounds sad, but it was actually great. Made my own hours, was making very solid, dependable income. Plus, since it made my living situation, income, and time very flexible, I moved across the country and lived with a friend and 7 other people who were far more social than me and ended up being very social and outgoing for the first time in my life. It was basically arbitrage, and when the poker boom started to fade, I used similar strategies to supplement my income with sports betting. I quit for 3 reasons. 1, I didn't see a future. I'm not a risk taker, and it was obvious to me I would have to move up in risk acceptance to continue to make a living, as the online poker boom faded out. 2, it was pretty apparent to me that my job could be done by a bot or someone with advanced programming/algorithms, so that's just a matter of time. And 3, I met a girl. And the girl, now my wife of 12 years, had no problem with poker, but for the first time in my life, I saw myself as wanting the suburban kids and picket fence life. Poker wasn't really fun anymore, and playing against drunk Brits at 4 a.m. my time wasn't going to work for me for the next 30 years. I had a business degree, so I just went out and started a boring 9 to 5 call center job in a sector that I figure would always mean I had steady work and a middle class income. My after-tax take-home pay was less than half of what it had been from poker/sports betting. Decision-wise, so far, so good. 10 years later, I'm solidly in the kind of 9 to 5 pointless middle management job that many people would absolutely hate, but I'm very happy with. Because my new dream is my family and kids, and my job means that we always have a roof and groceries, and I'm there for every recital or soccer game or first new food or chapter book, etc. Sounds like a pointless dream to some, but it's not one that was forced on me. It's one I chose, and I'm thankful that I did pursue poker and was able to leave it when I was ready. Story 13. I was studying to be a teacher. I finally realized after several years of aimless drifting after high school, what I really wanted to do was teach. I moved in with my girlfriend after her parents kicked her out, and we weren't doing well financially. I had a crappy part-time job, and she was underpaid in her full-time role. We could barely pay the bills, let alone do anything fun. After several months being unable to enjoy even simple luxuries, with her having an emotional breakdown and me unable to focus on my studies, resulting in me likely having to repeat some classes, I made the decision that I had to start bringing money in. I hit the job market and took the first full-time office job that would have me, working as a filing clerk at a finance company, making half of what I would have as a teacher, but without having to wait 2 years until graduating. The emotional benefit of being able to just enjoy ourselves without having to struggle from paycheck to paycheck was well worth giving up the dream. That was about 15 years ago now, and I've worked my way up to middle management at an insurance company. My skills are marketable and the industry is generally stable. My now wife and I are both doing well for ourselves. Looking back, I honestly don't know if I would have been a good teacher, and I have no regrets about my decision to throw it in. Story 14. Having a secure and comfortable life eventually was my dream. I had aspirations when I was young to go into music or writing, and I really did try for a career in those areas for a little while. But these are fields where deeply talented people, much more talented than me, work themselves to the bone for years with no guarantee of being able to support themselves steadily. Some people seem to be preternaturally able to do this through some combination of grit and work and luck and positive outlook, but I'm not one of them. I realized in my mid-20s that I wasn't ever going to be happy living with so much uncertainty, and I'm fortunate to have, eventually, found a desk job that seems boring on paper, but lets me solve interesting problems and work with cool, smart people. The work is steady and pays more than I ever dreamed of making when I was young. And the thing is, I'm in my 40s and I still write and make music whenever I want. My life gives me space for it now. During the pandemic, I've learned how to play a new instrument, just for the hell of it. And when I make music or write now, it feels good. Just the way it felt when I was young. My financial security isn't tied up in it. I can just love it for what it is, because it's beautiful and makes my brain feel good. Story 15. I always wanted to be an academic in computer science, so I applied to universities in the US because it's the cutting edge of my field. The first time I applied, I got rejected roundly. I worked real hard on my profile and applied again. I got accepted into an MS course and got rejected for all my PhD applications. I decided I'd do the MS and then look to continue a PhD. I had done a few internships and decided I wanted to be a researcher in the industry. It seemed like the best of both worlds. Things kinda went according to plan, but my close friend in the program unalived himself, and that started this spiral of depression. By the time I was done with my MS, I was burned out. I decided to work in the industry for a few years and then apply for a PhD at a better program. 3 years later, I applied to PhD programs and the best lab called me just to come hang out with them during some event they were having. When I went there, I got the same PTSD that I had with my MS, and I liked it even less because I was used to the industry where I was treated like a competent person, and here, the other grad students talked down to me, even though I was at that moment working on a very impactful product. I went home loving the professors in the lab and hating the colleagues and really confused. Then my parents called and told me my father was diagnosed with cancer. I couldn't afford the pay cut to be a grad student anymore. My family needed my income. I was dejected. Then I got fired from my industry job and had to find another one, stat. When I began applying for jobs, I applied with the intent of getting a job I could be in for years, because who knew how long my father would need chemo. Then I realized what I really was attracted to was autonomy to work on a problem. There were lots of people working on exciting problems, but they weren't usually academics. They were entrepreneurs. Lots of them were fresh out of undergrad. And by then, my dream of being an industry researcher had become impossible too. Lots of my dream employers had fired their researchers or integrated them into innovation teams where they couldn't just be working on cool stuff that would take years to become a reality. They had to work on short-time horizons. A PhD wasn't really going to give me what I wanted. I found a job with a nice startup which worked on exciting problems, and which paid very well. I've completely ditched the idea of being an academic. Now I just want to save up enough money to take care of my family without having to hold down a stressful job. Story 16. Not exactly what you're asking, but pretty similar. I wanted to be an airline pilot since I was around 4 years old. Ever since I got a chance to go visit the flight deck during a flight. This was pre-9/11. The first thing that went wrong is that I was going through a tough time when I was getting my GCSEs, so didn't do great in them. For anyone unaware, GCSEs are the final exams you do in school. In most subjects, these exams are what give you your final grade. It's not like the GPA system where you're constantly graded. Only these final exams matter. But this wasn't a huge issue. I can resit the exams when I'm ready and get better grades. Fast forward a few years, and due to various different things going on in my life, I still haven't retaken my exams. For a little while, I did give up on the dream because I couldn't see any possible way of being able to afford to train to be a pilot. It costs around 80,000 to 120,000 euros. So I started taking minimum wage jobs to start paying my way. Another couple of years later, I heard of a guy from my local pub who's an electrician, and he was looking for an apprentice. It's something that interested me, so I took my shot and got the job. I quickly learned that the average pay for an electrician on construction sites was around 1,000 euros a week, 52,000 euros a year. A few years of training, then a few years of working, I could be the flight deck by the time I'm 25. The dream chasing was back on. A couple of years into my training, I come across a cable I'd never used before. It was a dolly cable, which is used for lighting control. A normal power cable in the UK will use the colors brown, blue, and green and yellow stripes for the conductors. Dolly cables have two more conductors, one red and one black. I couldn't tell the difference between the brown and the red cable. Here I was at 23 years old, hearing what no aspiring pilot wants to hear for the very first time in my life, that I could be colorblind. I thought it couldn't be true, as I can see colors, and surely it would have been picked up on earlier. I took practically every colorblind test I could find online, and it was unanimous. Red-green colorblind. To top it off, this meant I couldn't complete my apprenticeship as an electrician. So here we are today. I'm now 3 weeks away from being 27. I work for the UK's most wonderful creation, the NHS. The money is by no means great, but it's enough to get by, and I absolutely love my job. I could see myself staying here for the rest of my working life, but there's not a day that goes by that I don't think, what if? It's often the source of my poor mental health episodes. It's almost as if my purpose has been ripped away from me, and I don't know why I'm actually here now. In essence, I can't fathom how one could walk away from their dream, because losing mine crushed me. It wasn't my choice to give up on my dream, but I effing hate it. I would give anything to be up there. So this truly is heartbreaking. We talk about people giving up on their dreams or walking away from them, deciding that it's not necessarily for them, but to have a physical condition prevent you from pursuing it any further, that's got to be devastating. So definitely feel for OP here. That sucks, but I hope you can find your purpose somewhere else. Story 17. I was a Broadway actor. I also appeared on a few TV shows and in a handful of movies. I am in the process of giving up and moving on. I hope. I've been a theater actor my entire life. It's truly the only thing I ever wanted to be. I grew up in the Midwest with dreams of living in NYC. Fame was never really the goal. I just wanted to work. For 20 years, I did. I was accepted to the fanciest performing arts school in the world and did well there. When I graduated, with a BFA, I got an agent and immediately began working at the theaters in NYC and regionally and thought my career was on its way. I watched so many of my contemporaries begin to succeed. Many of my friends and schoolmates are now legit celebrities and A to B list actors. I never broke through. I played supporting roles in big productions while usually understudying the lead. I had my moments. When the lead broke a rib, I got to go on and play one of the greatest roles in the Western theater canon for 5 nights on Broadway, in a Tony-nominated production, playing opposite one of the greatest living actresses. It was an amazing week, but didn't change anything in my career. I was still viewed as incredibly capable, but nonetheless an understudy. I may have screwed myself by being too good at the job. I was thought that I was the best actor to whom they would never actually give the part. I was happy to be in the room, but always hoped for and expected more. I got married to an actress and continued to pursue my career. My wife struggled. Opportunities for women, especially non-musical theater, are even more rare than they are for men. After years of watching her grow more and more frustrated, I made the decision to leave NYC. We moved to a city that had a healthy theater scene with a handful of equity houses where I could work and earn health insurance. I had great relationships with two of the artistic directors and had every reason to believe I could work as much as I had when I lived in NYC. We bought a house in the suburbs after paying rent on apartments for over 2 decades. I was excited to see what would happen next. Well, both ADs left their jobs a year after the move, and their replacements have not shown the same level of interest in employing me that their predecessors did. I thought I might be able to teach here, given my fancy, albeit undergrad, degree and professional experience. There are a lot of colleagues in the city. Alas, in academia, not having an advanced degree is a deal breaker usually, and I've had zero success in that arena. I'm a white dude in my late 40s without much teaching experience, so I'm not the candidate that anyone's looking for right now. I never worked a day job long enough to advance beyond the entry level. Every time I was about to be promoted at a bar or restaurant, I would book an acting gig and have to leave. Now I'm staring down 50 with almost nothing saved for retirement. I have no security. I'll lose my health insurance in 2 months. In theory, I have acting work booked for whenever the pandemic ends, but the theater will be the last industry to come back from this, so who knows when that will be. I have no rich relatives who will leave me money. I'm not sure what to do. I hope it's not too late for me to find a second career. I'm finally ready. Story 18. First asked for a sex change at about 18. Didn't even know about them or what I was suffering was a recognized medical thing prior to that point. Saw a psychologist for a couple years, but moving out from my parents, getting a job, etc., I let the dream slip. Asked 3 more times, 2 different doctors, pretty much same thing each time. Either talked down because I was still unsure, or talked out of it, recognizing that it was a horrendously complicated and difficult process that probably wouldn't end in the result of me being any happier. I was always sure about what I wanted, never sure about if the end result would do enough to break the dichotomy that I perceive what my mind/subconscious sees as my physical form and what the actual reality tells me. Would feminizing my particularly masculine body allow me to be comfortable within myself, or would it make it worse? Now, I'm fairly sure I'd have been happier. Then I didn't really understand that these feelings won't go away and I cannot live with them in the background. Last doctor I asked, I was only looking for castration, moving more towards a genderless/agender than a feminine life. This time I even waited out the waiting list, about 4 years, and talked to a specialist, but was kicked off the program for not being committed enough. I couldn't get to an appointment without sleeping rough in the city, where the hospital was, the night before. I gave my hospital about a month's notice that I couldn't attend. I'd already had to cancel/rearrange one appointment, so they didn't give me the chance on another. But I live nearly half a day's travel from the hospital, don't have any friends/family in the city any longer, and am reliant on public transport. When the appointment was first made, I had the offer of a lift, but the person giving me the lift had to change their plans. I don't drive, can't afford to stay in a hotel, I did look, and wasn't going to be able to make the appointment. It was at 11 a.m., and the earliest I could get home would have been about 11:30. Worse, at the previous appointment, one of the things they said I must do to remain on the program was to lose weight. But one of the reasons given for kicking me off the program was that I was in denial about my weight because I said I was big-boned. Before the above appointment, I'd managed to lose 2.5 stone, about 35 pounds. I was so angry. I'd done everything they said I had to do, jumped through all their hoops, and been kicked off because of something beyond my control. I do, in fact, have very big bones. I'm also fat. The two can coexist and not be excuses. If I wasn't fat, I'd still have big bones. Worse, IMO, was the fact that the orchiectomy, which is all I wanted, is a minor OP. Local anesthetic, incision in the scrotum, pop the testes out, and seal it up. Takes about 10 minutes. It could be done in my local GP surgery by a well-trained nurse/GP. And if I said I was a danger to children, which I'm not, I could be fast-tracked for I might be one of the few men that wishes for testicular or prostate cancer. I wish now that I'd followed through on my first attempt. My feelings haven't changed much in the last 25 years. Got more extreme, if anything. I still hate being male, and I won't ever be a female, either living as one or looking like one. I don't know that my life would have been better or the end result would have been different, but I would have had a far better chance of accessing both the hospital and the support 20 years ago than I do now. Story 19. I had everything set up to become the pride of my family. I was going to be a perfect little Midwestern girl, go to University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana, and become a language pathologist, marry a wealthy Christian man, have 5 perfect kids for my parents, become a published author, and be a perfect housewife while also getting a PhD. My family just kept telling me what they thought I was capable of, and never stopped to think about what I wanted. Once I started college in 2016, I cracked under the pressure and nearly drove myself to my death on the way home from class one day. I never told anyone. In 2018, when I experienced a massive life change, I cracked a little more, and downed a bunch of prescription sleeping pills and Xanax, hoping I would die in my sleep. I didn't. In 2020, the state of the world, I think, just broke me, but not in the way I was expecting. Since 2019, I've been living in Colorado with my boyfriend, who changed my life and helped me realize that there's still pride in living a simple life. This year, I started engaging with nature more. I started seeing what was really important to me and how volatile everything is. As a human, you could lose everything in a second. We aren't in control, no matter how much we try to be. I just quit my retail job and feel incredible. Now, my boyfriend and I work from home doing sewing for a local business, so we make our own hours and spend time together and with our pets. We just bought a house in September, and I'm starting a garden this coming spring. We've been taking care of our health, eating more fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and we feel so good. We aren't tied down by society and materialism, and it's beautiful, it's safe, it's secure. I don't need a degree to be proud or financially stable. I don't need to base my life off of outdated Midwesters' religious standards. Taking this leap of faith, coming to terms with the fact that I didn't want to be the pride of my family, was the best thing I ever did for myself. I want to be the pride of me. The best part is, now that the stress has decreased significantly, and since I'm healthier than I've been in my whole life, I'm actually on track to getting off my antidepressant and anti-anxiety medications later this year, for the first time since I was 8 years old. Whatever you're asking this question for, OP, I guarantee that following what makes you feel most happy and safe will be the right choice. Don't live for anyone else's expectations. You owe it to yourself. Story 20. True story. Started as a software engineer. Dream job. Made good money, but then my wife started a business. Over the course of a couple years, the business, which was operating out of our one-bedroom apartment, got bigger and bigger, to the point where she was making the same as me. We decided to go serious on her business as it just kept growing. We started right around the housing bubble/crash, but this didn't seem to affect us at all. We rented a small place and hired a couple people to help her scale the business. I helped too. I would work my software job from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. and help her from 4:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. and all day on weekends. I've never been afraid of hard work, so this didn't really faze me. For 2 years we did this. The business continued to grow to the point it was grossing about 5 to 6 times my salary. We have about 50% net margin, so we're making about 3 times my salary by the end of year 2. By about end of year 1, I was getting tired. I work 12 plus hours a day non-stop. One of my core tenets in life is if people are throwing money at your feet, you do whatever it takes to scoop up as much of it as possible. I decided I needed to quit my job. I didn't really know anything about what my wife did. She's an artist, but I knew that my time was better spent helping her grow the business. I had been in software for about 10 years at this point and realized my career has plateaued. So I hatched a plan. I would continue working my software job until we could buy our first home. We saved up a bunch of money for the next year, and we found our first place for about $500K. It was basically the same payment we were making for our apartment, so we went for it. I still remember that day we closed on the house and signed the papers. I walked into my manager's office the same day and gave my 2-week notice. Best feeling ever. Now, about 8 years later, we've grown our business to about 1.4 million gross and about 60% net margin. Crazy, I know, but what we do is highly specialized, and we can charge about 50 to 80% more than all of our competitors. Was my dream to run a business of which I had no inherent talent or knowledge about to this day? No, but it was the absolute right call as I actually absorbed a ton of lessons by working in tech and applied it to our business, like how to automate and scale tasks, manage people, etc., etc. My path definitely diverged from where I thought I'd be at this point, but it has afforded us a second, much larger home in the Bay Area, along with enough to retire on, and allows us to travel freely in relative luxury when we choose, which is sometimes, but we also enjoy simple pleasures too. At any rate, don't sweat the dream. If people are throwing money at you for something you're doing, grab the biggest bucket and shovel you can, and get to work cleaning that mess up. Story 21. I was in an art program in high school. really wanted to go to art school for college. Came from a broke family. Had mostly crappy grades my high school career, so I ended up at community college majoring in photography and art history. I ended up in an abusive relationship, and one particular evening, my ex completely destroyed a large piece I had been working on, 5x8 painting, like destroyed beyond salvaging, and that was the last time I ever did any kind of art. I eventually dropped out of school, and it took me years to get out of the relationship. A couple of months after it ended, I went back to school to finish my degree. At that time, I was working full-time at a community mental health agency as an admin for a program and really liked the work they were doing. I ended up changing my major to social science, finished my AA, went on to get my BA and MA to become a mental health clinician. I love the work itself, as I mostly work with foster youth who have experienced trauma, but the administrative, bureaucratic, liability side of things is extremely draining. Adding in the fact that the field is unbelievably underpaid has been disappointing. Once I'm licensed, hopefully this year, I'm considering leaving the field to try something different. Most clinicians I know work at agencies for the benefits and do private practice on the side. I have 2 kids and don't want to miss out on spending time with them to work a full-time job, plus another job on the side just to make good money. I love being a therapist and helping people, but I also have to support my family and have time to spend with them, not just work myself to death. Story 22. My dream was to work at a hedge fund and become rich. Out of school, I went into investment banking, and after a year plus, I left there to be a junior analyst at a hedge fund. Soon climbed my way into managing director by 25, making $350K in salary plus the same in bonus. By 27, I was a portfolio manager managing $20 million, managed $50 million at 28, and $400 million by the time I was 30. My goal was always to make $1 million before 30. I accomplished that with $1 million take-home at 29. All the while, I had become addicted to painkillers, oxycodone. I was spending like $4 to $5K a month on them, snorting lines in the bathroom at work, doing about 150 milligrams a day. One day, I had bought options on Google earnings and made $5 million in one day for the company I worked for. I took home 18% cut, so it was like making $1 million in an hour or something. I lost some of that the rest of the year, so my take-home for the year was $1 million. At 30, I got sober while working. I just didn't really care that much about work at that point. I wasn't doing it great. I've always been lazy, just managed to get by on my natural talent for trading. Even making my bed every day at that point was a huge deal for me. I remember crying in happiness when I was able to do that. I had had some kind of spiritual / Kundalini awakening while getting sober, and I had begun to meditate and do yoga and lost even more interest in my job. Even though I was having a decent year, I got fired in December 2016. I got paid $1 million in severance for that year. I could have gone back and got another job. In this industry, you can literally make tens of millions in a year. It's absurd. I left it all on the table and ended up moving to Mexico with my wife. I had maybe 700 to 800K in the bank. So I was young, semi-retired, living on a beach in Mexico, not really having to work, had made $1 million by 30, have a great wife, a great loving family, 3 awesome cats. And guess what? I was still completely unhappy, not fulfilled at all, and living in a condition of having horrible patterns of unlove, still worrying about money, insecurity, etc. I was content, but not fulfilled. So that realization was like a couple years ago. I had a moment when, like a drunk person says to a friend, I said to God, "Here, take the keys. I have no idea the way to live life." This coming from someone who had been a hardcore atheist since a teen. I had basically played the game everyone told me to play. Go to a really good school, Ivy League, get a great job, make a lot of money, then retire to the beach. That's what everyone tells you, right? That's someone you will retire on the beach and be magically happy. Well, I tested it out, and it wasn't true for me, so I decided to give up the game. After that moment, the very next day, I had some experiences where I came into relationship with a dead spiritual master, who then led me to a spiritual master who's still alive. Since then, it's been a process of trying to completely surrender the body-mind. You can't seek happiness and find it. The very process of seeking happiness is a confession of your unhappiness. You can't become happy by persisting in the method of unhappiness. Happiness is always already the case. Anyway, almost every week these days, I say, this is the happiest I've ever been in my life. Sometimes I even feel absolutely blissful. I still have plenty of patterns to transcend, but being in the process of transformation is so amazing. The fact that such a process exists is enough to be ecstatic. This happiness is available to everyone and is always given and always free. Don't need to do drugs or make $1 million or retire early to a beach to be it. What a miracle. Story 23. I was convinced that I wanted to be a fashion designer during early high school. I worked odd jobs to buy sewing machines, mannequins, got a shelf full of design books, and learned to paint and draw to hone my skills. Went to fashion school and didn't make it past the second year. It was awful. I've never done so many all-nighters in my life, and on top of being sleep deprived, the work itself was hours of manual labor, drawing patterns, cutting, sewing, and learning contemporary design concepts, which were extremely arbitrarily plucked out of thin air, with no real content behind the theory. I was so enamored as a teen by the whole "Haute culture pay $20K for a hand-sewn Armani dress" that I ignorantly assumed it would be a glamorous life. Realized it was a harsh reality of almost no job security and rarely any transferable skills. Ended up dropping out of fashion school, copped a ton of crap from the family, got depressed, felt like a failure. Did a finance degree in college, got accepted based off my high school academics, cause I had no other interests and needed a career path. Didn't manage to get a job after college cause my marks sucked, so started learning code and programming. It turned out to be the best decision I've ever made in terms of pivoting, and now I'm about to be promoted to a tech lead at my current job. I absolutely love coding, science, and computer science. I wish I was more open-minded to these things in school, as opposed to following my passion and blocking out absolutely anything else that didn't fit the criteria or was unrelated to design. I found that my brain loves logical thinking more than anything, which is why so much design theory killed me in college. And I don't feel like a failure, just that I took a bit longer to see what I genuinely enjoyed, based on reality and not an idealized dream I had as a 15-year-old. Story 24. From middle school until I was almost finished with high school, I was convinced I was going to go to school to be a game designer. This was 17 years ago. I was told it wasn't a real job. I wasn't smart enough. You know, the same thing every kid who wants to leave home in a small town is told. I sent in my application to college and was told I didn't take enough math to qualify for the degree I wanted to take. I tried to take some extra classes, but between parents demanding me to get an income and meeting my future wife, it just didn't happen. I got a McJob and just did what I could to be around my girlfriend. The next year, my buddy invited me to lunch at the Waffle House he ran and ambushed me with the area vice president. We all ate and chatted, and in the end, I was offered a manager trainee job. 6 months later, I had my own Waffle House I was managing. 20 years old, making close to $65K with no degree. I was in heaven, but I worked about 80 hours a week and never saw my wife. Well, we took our honeymoon to Tampa, Florida, because she had lived there as a child and wanted me to see it. I fell in love instantly. I called my boss and told him if there was any chance of moving to Florida with Waffle House, I wanted the chance. Less than a month later, I got the call that corporate Waffle House just bought a huge franchise of Waffle Houses in the Southeast, and they wanted corporate managers to come down and help the transition. I was getting my chance. We sold our house. My wife found a teaching job real fast, and we brought a trailer for us and our dog/cat. It was cheap and in a decent area. We got to save money and live simple for a year. After that, we bought a house during the crash, and it was bigger than anything we could have dreamed of. A little while after we bought the house, I left Waffle House because I had an injury to my knee and had a permanent disability rating that could not complete my job specifications as listed anymore. The state offered to help with some college classes as long as I was looking for work, so I took them up on it. Figured I would get an associate's and use my manager experience to find a better job. A year later, my wife told me she saw an ad to go teach overseas in Abu Dhabi, UAE, making amazing money. I could keep going to school online. We would sell our house and cars. We would have to rehome our pets, but friends in the area were nice enough to help with that. That was 7 years ago. We've lived in Abu Dhabi, UAE, and Pyeongtaek, South Korea. We have had 3 amazing children while living abroad. I finished my MBA this last summer. All in all, I can say I'm extremely happy with how my life turned out. I still wish I could make a game someday, but only to prove those a-holes wrong from my hometown. Story 25. For as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a tattoo artist. I was fascinated by tattoos from a young age. A permanent picture on your skin? What wizardry is this? Anyways, throughout school, I focused on art and went to college, UK, and studied art and design. At 18, I was looking for apprenticeships in tattoo shops, just pretty much anyone that would have me. With no luck. Then I got pregnant and it seemed even further away. When I was 21, a studio opened in my local town and they were asking for an apprentice. I was a little out of practice. I'd swap my pencil cases for nappy bags and under-eye bags, but I went out and bought a sketch pad and filled that bloody thing in 2 days. I took it to the studio and told them they'd found an apprentice. A few days later, I started there and began my dream. 4 years later, when I turned 25, I got sick. It took a year or so to get a diagnosis, and in that time, I realized I didn't miss it as much as I thought I would. By then, I had a steady client base and hated letting them down, but even with a diagnosis for my health problems, nailing down a treatment was a bumpy road, and I had a few hiccups coming back to the studio. My gear had been stolen, and I just decided I couldn't be doing with the extra stress and walked away. Now I work an office job with regular hours and regular income. I regret walking away sometimes, but I don't miss the awkward clients or the time wasters. I don't miss doing a full day tattooing and then coming home and having to spend an entire evening drawing up the next day's appointments, only for those people not bothering to show up and not answering when you call. I don't miss sexist a-holes making comments about female tattooers or clients who take the opportunity to touch you inappropriately. Life is much simpler now, and I need simple. Story 26. Video game designer, and I haven't quite given up, but I'm right on the cusp of it. I'm incredibly creative and have come up with many ideas for games since I was 12. Even saw many games come and go that were my ideas, never brought to fruition. I used to work as a graphic designer, and I saw what it's like doing work for someone else. It's really quite confining, so I decided with video games to do my own small games rather than work for peanuts under one of the big publishers. I've also tried to work with small groups of people over the years making games, only for the group to fail due to a variety of life obligations and opportunities. To make ends meet, I've sort of coasted from job to job. Did tech support for a while at various companies, now I'm a configuration manager at the Coast Guard as a contractor. In this position, I've made a name for myself as the presenter guy due to my insane work presentations. I make really boring meetings come alive. It's this avenue that I've tried to force video game creation to work. As you see, I make my presentations now with Unity in order to learn C#. I also do morale events where I do in fact create video games meant for 30 plus people to play for an hour that they can understand within 5 minutes. Quite a challenge. Through the last few years, I've learned well what is perfect for coworkers to understand and enjoy, and what is too much of a game for an hour of play. Here's the problem. I'm 38 now, and that contractor job may be ending this year. I'm also very focused at work with my side projects, but abysmal at home. During COVID, I've been working from home, which has put a stop to my fancy meetings, morale events, and my focus on video games. I inexplicably can't lift a finger while at home and haven't coded since March 2020. Even though I've time in spades, it's a major focus problem. I'm at the crossroads now to whether I bust my ass and make a simple game over the next 8 months or so, with the slim chance of turning it into something potentially profitable, or bust my ass to get certifications I don't want, to get a job I don't want. I'm being dramatic. Obviously, I've other options, but I feel like if I do anything other than do my own game, this will be the end of my dream. I'm single and have few financial obligations, so I can sort of still make risky maneuvers, but I do need to be careful how far I throw away current income from resume experience. The CM job offers further than presentation or morale event guy. I don't feel my game idea passion will be as keen over the years as many ideas have slipped away, so the time to make this happen may be very short. Story 27. I always wanted to be a teacher. I never remember wanting to be anything else, except for when I was 4 years old and wanted to be a golden retriever. I had a high school English gig lined up for when I graduated college. The pay sucked, and it was barely a real school, but I loved it. My students adored me, so much so that I was bullied by some of the other teachers, but I adored my students, so it was worth it. In the spring of my first year, my favorite student died in an accident. It was awful. Over the summer, the head mistress told me they didn't need me back as a full teacher, but maybe I could help out in the library or something since I had been so helpful to all the students while they were mourning. I decided that what I needed was a 9-to-5 job to pay the bills while I went to graduate school. I was still so young, so I had time to prepare. Through some connections and family friends, I got a job at a local bank as a personal banker/teller. I wasn't great at it, but it was just a stepping stool to me. Then in 2009, the mortgage business started getting really busy, and our mortgage department needed extra help, so they moved me. Now, my surprising knack for mortgage banking has carried me away from home and to the big city I always wanted to live in. I make a ton of money, I'm well respected in my career, I'm happily married to a man I never would have met if I'd stayed in teaching. Sometimes I still think about going back to school and back to teaching, but I truly love my accidental career and the life it has brought me. Story 28. I've been acting on stage most of my life. I was originally a computer science major in college, but started failing my classes because I was spending all my time in the theater. In a fit of passion, I switched majors, got my degree in acting, and set out to build a career as a stage actor. I learned some hard lessons. While it was easy enough to get on stage if I wanted to do it for free, paid roles are rare and extremely competitive. To make a living wage acting, you have to have connections, be constantly hustling for the next gig, and get lucky. Not to mention that the majority of paid gigs are things like toothpaste commercials, not exactly artistically satisfying. So after almost a decade of auditioning, working for the exposure, and bouncing between odd jobs on the side to barely make ends meet, I finally had enough. I retaught myself programming over a year and a half, paid for a boot camp with a big old-fashioned loan, and finally landed my first job as a software engineer. The difference in my life continues to amaze me. That first job paid 3 times what I had ever made before, and I've since doubled that first salary. But more important than the money is the stability. As an actor, I was competing against hundreds of others for people who didn't give a damn and would replace me in a second. As an engineer, I'm constantly in demand. Recruiters pestering me with job offers have become a nuisance. Amazing. Do I miss the stage? Yeah. I like programming, but if I could trade it for acting, I would. But I learned you have to think about the whole picture. The reality is that being on stage is how I spent a small fraction of my time as an actor. Most of my time went into things I hated. I hated networking. I hated hunting for the next gig. I hated the unstable minimum wage side jobs. Getting to do my favorite thing 5% of the time is just not as nice as getting to do my second favorite thing 100% of the time. Story 29. I started out in college as a pre-med major. Went down that path for 3 years, but it ended when I got to human anatomy. We had real cadavers for lab, and I decided it wasn't for me. I also almost puked during class. I sat down and thought about what I wanted to do, but I didn't know. This was also right around the financial collapse in 2008-2009. My dad lost his job over a year before this and was burning savings in retirement to make it through. I was still living at home and helping ends meet. My whole family ended up moving to Iowa/Nebraska area, and I went with them. Changed schools and majors, which after 3 years of school sounds as awful as it was. I restarted as a biology/pre-forestry degree in a hope of just graduating. I still also did some pre-med stuff to get through the degree program. I graduated in 2011, still working at Walmart, with a kid on the way and no hope of finding a job. I changed jobs to a small appliance to make a bit more money to get by. I ended up getting fired from there 3 days before flying out to see my family in Ohio and get married. Last thing I did was mail, this was 2012, you could still mail applications, an application to a small food facility in Nebraska. I ended up interviewing and getting the job working nights in an analytical chem lab testing soy protein isolate. I never intended to make food manufacturing a career. It was dull work at first, but I worked my ass off volunteering for everything I could. Ended up getting to day shift in little less than a year. Fast forward to now, and I've been in food manufacturing for over 8 years. I currently have a job working as a business unit level chemist, which I love. I've never been laid off and know some of the best people I could imagine. I've been working from home for most of COVID and get to pick what projects and stuff I work on mostly. When I got fired from that appliance store, I thought my world had ended. I went on to make a career out of it, with the highlight being managing a team remotely in California. I'm in Michigan, through COVID. It tested me in ways I couldn't imagine, but apparently I did a great job. Life is full of happy accidents, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Story 30. In high school, I had a dream where I wanted to get involved in politics and policy. I was involved in my school's debate team and Model United Nations. I won many awards, and one of my essays actually got noticed by General Petraeus, and I was invited to join a think tank in D.C., which would have helped shape U.S. policy with what was going on in Lebanon at that time. A year passed since the 2006 Lebanon War, and the U.S. was debating how it should get involved with peace building in the region, which is exactly what my award-winning essay was about. I never told my parents about this opportunity because my family simply didn't have the resources to send me there. My father and stepmom were unemployed. My stepfather's dream business was going under due to the recession. My mother was barely helping keep our household's head above water with her job as an NICU nurse, which was super stable, but not enough to cover for her and my stepfather, myself, and both of my sisters, one of which was in college out of state pursuing her dream. Instead, I got a job working at a local pizza place and went to college locally in the area to help out my family. I ended up dropping out of college to work full-time to help out better. There is a silver lining to all this, though. If I went to DC, I would have never been in town to start dating my post-high school sweetheart. We dated like a month after graduating. 7 years later, I left that pizza gig for a job working at a flexographic printing company and was finally financially stable enough to go on my own. I found out I have a huge passion for color theory and made a very lucrative career dealing with it, where I make well above the industrial average for people in the same position. I'm probably more successful now as a college dropout working in the printing industry than I would have been as some random guy in a super oversaturated, competitive world of politics. I married my girlfriend from back then, and we welcomed a daughter about 1.5 years ago. In addition, staying home has gotten me a lot closer to my family, and it's a relationship I would never trade for anything else in the world. I know many people aren't religious, but here's my take. Sometimes we have plans in this world, and sometimes God has bigger and better plans for us. We just have to listen and make the best out of our situation. If I followed my dreams, I don't think I would have been nearly as happy or as fulfilled as I am today. Story 31. This question is near and dear to me. In short, I'm finally happy with the results, although it took a few years of growing pains. Years ago, I had an alcohol abuse problem. Because of my impulsive actions, I nearly spent the rest of my life in prison, but somehow I was fortunate and only received a DWI and some trespassing charges. I took this as a wake-up call. I went to counseling/therapy, got a diagnosis, and began to change my life. Because I truly felt awful for how much I had taken from society, I felt the need to give back and make positive changes. I had always been intelligent and performed well under pressure, so I decided to enter the healthcare field. I went back to school, worked hard, made personal sacrifices, and graduated as the top student in my class of 140 students. Unfortunately, I was unable to even get an interview after a few months of searching. My criminal record prevented any employer from wanting to incur the risk. I settled for a position in sales, in an industry I previously worked as a laborer. It turns out it's a relatively good fit for my overall skills. Still, I spent the years maintaining my professional healthcare license and searching. Eventually, I had to make a decision. Stay with my new job, which paid well enough and had good benefits and working hours, or take a lower wage for part-time work and no benefits to pursue my healthcare dream. I decided to take the safe route and stay where I was. Mostly, I did this for the sake of my growing family, but it wasn't easy to accept. I had pursued healthcare because I did want to sacrifice myself in order to help others. I needed that to help me stop feeling like garbage because of how I used to live. 5 years later, I'm the manager of my office. I do community work in order to give back, and I'm doing well with my mental health and personal wealth. Still, I have a desire to give back to people. I don't think I'll ever shake that. I've also had no problem staying away from the trouble that led me down this path. At the very least, I stand as proof that people can change for the better. Story 32. I dropped out of college 2 times. Both times I went for psychology. I dropped out the first time as I just thought being 19 and trying to figure out what the rest of my life was going to be was stupid, and left to work at a daycare center as I was debating on teaching instead. Well, it's not the same, and most of the people I worked with were drug dealers, and one I even bought from. Anyways, the second time I dropped out for the same major. I figured, let's just finish and be a counselor. Once I dove into the salary and the cost of school, I dropped out. I've had jobs that made more than what my average income was going to be without debt versus staying in. I spent 10 years in sales and retail, but I learned how to grade diamonds, and I purchased jewelry from the public and sold high-end jewelry. I've gained a lot of experience in other jobs as well. Honestly, sometimes I regret it. I'm actually a stay-at-home mom now. I love being with my kids, but I sometimes wish I would have just finished the damn degree just to have one, even if I didn't stick with the career choice. I'd have more doors open as far as being able to counsel from home, open my own practice, writing a book with the word psychologist in there. I do help my friends. I'm usually the person they talk to when they're depressed because I make them think and help them see themselves for who they truly are and not for what they think they are. I would have been a great psychologist, but possibly unpopular as I don't sugarcoat crap. But I also analyze everything way too much, and with my anxiety, I think it made it worse when I was studying. LOL. I can always go back, but my kids are 8, 7, and 3, so I'll just focus on their success now. Like I said, I have days I regret it and wish I could turn back time, and it really hits me in the wrong spots. But for the most part, I know I can't go back in time and can only move forward. Story 33. I dedicated several years of high school and early college to animation, in particular, character design. At 18, I was accepted to Nomon in LA and was working 60 hours a week in a restaurant to save up to move out from Utah. The closer it got, the less it felt right to me. It was strange because I've always been a person with a backup plan, but I didn't have one for school. I ended up hitting my knees and praying, "Help me find what I'm supposed to do because I'm at a loss." After a week or so, I got a call from a cosmetology school in my state after I had won a drawing from entering my phone number to get a scholarship. I toured the school with my mom. She told me that there is a Paul Mitchell 5 minutes from our house, and I should take a look there. I toured the school and fell in love. I quit my job, paid off a huge chunk of tuition right off the bat with my savings, and started 2 weeks later. Best decision I ever made. If I hadn't learned a single thing about hair, it wouldn't have been worth it. While going to school there, I finally told my parents about my essay from high school after keeping it a secret for years. After I felt empowered by a presentation we had at the school on understanding and fighting self-unaliving. I broke up with a long-term boyfriend and met the love of my life, my husband, a month later. I made lifelong friends. I learned a lot about myself. As a hairstylist after school, I've had the opportunity to help so many people and touch or change lives. I never would have had that chance as an animator, and I never would have learned how important and rewarding it is to me. I saved a woman from domestic violence, comforted a woman after her fiancé died of an overdose, cared for an elderly woman whose entire family had died, shaved the heads of people with cancer, given makeovers to trans women to help them feel beautiful, and met a few of my now best friends. I have no regrets, and I wouldn't change a thing. Story 34. I really wanted to be a veterinarian. I wanted to work with animals of all kinds and even thought of going the zoology route. However, after my parents died and I saw the massive amount of work ahead of me, I thought maybe there's a way I can enjoy animals without the full veterinarian degree. I decided to pursue being a vet tech. I started off as just a kennel cleaner and was working my way up to vet tech because you can be trained and not have the degree. I ended up having 2 really bad pregnancies that kept me bedridden and in the hospital. My husband was doing everything he could to keep us afloat. It was stressful. During that time, I was so sick that I decided the vet career would have to be put on the shelf. Now, several years later, I have a 4-year-old daughter and an 18-month-old son. My husband and I bought an old farm for really cheap, and we have 5 goats, a dog, and a cat. We live on the outskirts of a small village in Alaska, and I've had to learn to vaccinate and care for my animals as there are no farm vets nearby and it's also cheaper. So I'm living the dream nonetheless, I'm just not caring for other people's animals. Although I do help the town folk with trimming nails or holding their animals so they can vaccinate them and stuff. It's really nice. Story 35. I wanted to be a stand-up comic. The first comedy special I ever watched was the original Kings of Comedy. I must have watched it 100 times from start to finish. This was in the early 2000s, and I never seriously pursued it until 2015. I would go to open mic nights 5 days a week. I would write every day, and even though it made me cringe, listen to my sets. I learned more about myself during this time than I ever had in my life. I had so much fun, and it was a rush to get up on stage, especially on the rare occasions you would do well. The laughter was like a drug coursing through my bloodstream. I ended up getting burnt out. I was working a full-time job and was going to open mics afterwards. I was up sometimes until 2 in the morning. I would have to wake up at 6 to be on time for work. Needless to say, I didn't always make it to work on time. Somehow, miraculously, I was never fired. I'm in a massive amount of debt now. It's not so much from stand-up, it's more so from going to art school and taking out loans. I think if I wouldn't have piled on as much debt, I might have stuck with it longer. I do regret not doing stand-up anymore, but the need for me to pay off my debt and have money for retirement keeps me up at night. I have a job now that pays well but doesn't allow freedom in my schedule. Story 36. All my life I felt lost until I found music in the 6th grade, and for the next 7 to 8 years, I saved and invested all my money into my music programs and equipment. I would sit in my room making music for hours. Sometimes I would get so lost in my music that I would forget to eat. I would forget to leave my room for days. I was really good, but I was also a perfectionist, so didn't release my music until I was 20 or so. It wasn't until then that I learned how competitive the industry was. It was more than a full-time job. If I wasn't composing, I was writing or recording, and afterwards I also had to advertise and promote, look for collaborations, so on. A lot of busy work. 2006 recession happened and my parents both lost their jobs. I stopped investing in my music to help with the bills, and then I also lost my job. For the next year or two, we struggled so much. The worst year, between the 3 of us, we made $18,000 that year for a family of 5. Those years brought a great wave of inspiration, but I no longer had the time as we were constantly job searching or I wouldn't have electricity. I would bust out 2 to 3 songs a day in my head and I'd write them down. I decided I had to do what was best for my family and I went back to school. I needed a job where I wasn't expendable. I chose to go to nursing school. All I did was school and work, 80 to 90 hours a week, for the next 4 years, and by the time I graduated, my parents had divorced and it had been 4 years since I had time to write or open my programs. It had been months since I touched a key or a string. I had become accustomed to live without making music, and I learned to live without it. I never got back into that mindset. I graduated with honors. As I said, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. My dreams had also shifted to career goals. I'm still working at those goals. I live very comfortably. I have a beautiful family. Music was fun, but sometimes I'd invest 2 to 3 days on a song that only brought in 200 to 300 initially, and then never again, or even worse, if I tried something new and my audience didn't like it, I'd bring in 0. Now I make 500 to 1,000 a day and have found other hobbies that also bring me peace of mind. I know in my heart of hearts that I'd never been able to make it big, but the chase was exhilarating. I'm okay with how things turned out. Story 37. My dream was to be a musician. I practiced hard, finished top of my class at university, and was well on the way to achieving more. In my early 20s, I was diagnosed with a chronic illness that steadily worsened until I was admitted to the hospital for emergency surgery. It took years to recover, and although I tried to go back to working as a musician, I never reached my previous level of health and would become so fatigued so easily until I all but gave up. It was initially really difficult to let go of the life I had wanted for myself, and I got really depressed. Throughout all of this, I continued playing music and realized that I could use it as a support for myself. I played more than I ever had before, and I processed a lot of my experiences by channeling my emotions into music. I heard about this field called music therapy and went back to study, realizing that I could share my rekindled passion for music with others and support them through their own challenges. These days, I live and work in a town with my partner, who's also a music therapist, and I play music with a range of people with disabilities for my work. It's not where I saw myself ending up, but I'm the most content I've ever been, not to mention finally financially stable, and I'm grateful for that. Although horrible at the time, my illness opened up a doorway I never knew was there. Story 38. I wanted to work in government, either in environmental policy or diplomacy/immigrant affairs. Got my degree in poli-sci. I checked all the boxes I needed to work for a government agency or nonprofit. I even landed a sexy internship with the U.S. State Department, where I met some of the biggest names in the government, only to feel like my soul was being sucked out of my body every time I got on the DC Metro for my commute. I then got a job in Japan as a teacher, mostly for the opportunity to explore the world and fall in love with it. I'm now a teacher back in the U.S. teaching English learners. The job is not glamorous. It can actually be so hard. These students are some of the most vulnerable in the country, only made worse with the pandemic. And of course, teachers do not get paid enough. But ironically, I wanted to go into government to help people, and I feel like my job as a teacher is doing that more than most jobs in government could have. My realization? Dreams are bullcrap. You can find enjoyment in so many different jobs if you allow yourself the chance to explore. Gunning toward one singular dream can set you up for so much disappointment. It's a trap, and based on my own experiences, a really unhealthy mentality. Also, related side note, it doesn't matter what you get your degree in as long as you have it. You can find ways to sell yourself using what experience you got while earning that degree. At the State Department, I met people with everything from poli-sci to theater and music degrees. Same as a teacher, just having the degree is what's important. People put way too much emphasis on getting the right degree, and I found it really doesn't matter as much as people say it does. Story 39. I attended an elite performing arts program, went to college on scholarship for acting and theater, spent 2 years auditioning in NYC, decided it wasn't for me, and am now working in sales for a software company. As a student in high school, I spent my mornings in dance classes, voice lessons, and then acting after lunch. I'd have 2 academic periods and then be sent back to rehearsal/an additional arts-based period. At 17 and 18, my school sponsored trips around the country where I auditioned for collegiate programs on their dime. I got into one, got a scholarship, and did much of the same for 4 more years. I loved acting and performing. I've always been a singer and was forced into dance by mentors at 16, so I wasn't half bad. By the time I was 22, I was getting noticed by agents, had friends doing TV and Broadway, and was planning how to manage the NYC to LA vagabond life, hoping to either book a Broadway show or find success doing pilot season in LA. I met some amazing people, including my wife, who's far more talented than I ever was, did some fun theater, but trying to be an actor is brutal. What people don't tell you, but is painfully obvious when you think about it, is that coming from money helps a lot. The kids with rich parents have apartments in Midtown Manhattan, walk to auditions at 5 a.m., sign up, go home, and watch TV until their time slot. They don't work or work short hours on off days for extra spending cash. Their early careers are subsidized by wealthy family members. As a working class actor, you sign up for the same 5 a.m. slot, but have to head to your survival job and slave away to pay the rent, eating beans, rice, ramen, etc. You then have to constantly hit the gym to keep up with your look. You're always broke. Then, if you're lucky enough to get seen for the audition, you have to find a way to stand out. There's a trope in the theater that they cast you in the first 30 seconds of meeting you. Sometimes the audition is literally 30 seconds before they cut you off and send you out. If you're lucky enough to get more time, every single part of you is picked apart. Your voice, height, weight, eye color, the way you slouch or don't, your essence is judged, measured, and sometimes openly ridiculed in your face. Then you go home, try to sleep, and do the same thing over and over again until you book a gig, which might last 3 months. Once that's done, you're back to the audition line and begging your agent for more appointments. This all came to a halt for me when I broke my foot. Embarrassingly, I wasn't performing, just drunk, hanging out with friends, and jumped a very high fence and shattered my foot. It's never been the same, and I have lingering pain 7 years later. I spent 8 weeks recovering and 4 more in a walking boot. I got to spend time with my family, who I had to be away from, and had to miss Christmases for work for years. It reminded me how important family is, how the people who love you are so important to your overall happiness, and success is something you define for yourself. I dropped my agent. Let's be honest, they didn't care I wasn't coming back to audition. Got an internship. Now, at 30, I'm an enterprise sales exec for a really exciting software company. I'm very comfortable, happily married, and my wife is pregnant with our first. I have a cool apartment in NYC. I can see my family on holidays, and have a dog I adore. I've gained a few inches in my waistline. I no longer dance, haven't since my injury, except at my wedding, and only sing at karaoke. I don't have a bug to act anymore. I'm much happier. Success is about finding happiness, whatever that looks like to you. Story 40. I worked for many years as a CG/VFX artist and TD freelancer. You've likely seen my work in dozens of huge movies and games. It had been my dream since I was a kid, as I had family that worked at ILM in their golden years. I had no interest in settling down at any of the big FX or animation houses, because honestly, their artists are treated like crap. After more than a decade of doing the work, I was simply burnt out. I was spending more time finding contracts than executing them, because there was always someone in India willing to do the work for a fourth the cost, and I wasn't making bank to begin with. So around 2016, when one of my main sources of contracts dried up, I got a call from a friend's boss. They were looking at someone who knew their way around Linux. Having worked pipelines as a TD, I was fairly familiar with the ins and outs, so I went and did some contract work for them that was outside of my usual wheelhouse. When I saw the state of their software, I offered up that I had a coding background creating tools in my previous field. They hired me full-time 2 months later to help with their modernization project. A few short years later, and I'm now director of development and living a very comfortable life. I have no regrets at all. I have a very fulfilling career with loads of free time to pursue other passions. I'm in the process of building my first house and have our first kid on the way. Not bad for someone who never finished their college degree, I'd say. Story 41. The only way I made it through poor grades and rejection in high school was this dream of mine that one day I'd be a rock star. I would imagine all my high school crushes coming to talk to me after shows, and then, finally, I'd have their undivided attention. My first day of college, all I could think about were the people that I was going to meet who would someday share the stage with me. Not one met the criteria until my last year of college, when I graduated with an associate's in music and started touring with my brand new band. The touring was moderately successful. We somehow always managed to break even, and we entered 3 different studios, only to come out with maybe 1 or 2 well-recorded poppy songs. The band inevitably split, and having realized the burden and unsuccessful nature of touring, I decided it would be better to make one great EP or album that would be deserving of the people's attention, rather than trying to gain fans by playing shows each night in different cities. So I went solo and worked my ass off to write good songs with good parts, playing all the instruments myself. Over the next 10 years, I released 12 different projects, 8 albums and 4 EPs, but none of them ever gained any traction. I was working a dead-end job and was slowly starting to realize that my dream may never come true. It was a very painful time, as that identity I had forged in high school in order to spare me the pain of rejection was now slowly dying. And over time, that clinging and grasping self did die. I decided to go back to school and pursue another path, which has made me healthier and more balanced. I still make music, but I try my very hardest to write for the joy of writing alone and let go of what I think the results should be. It's not easy, and there are still times when I slip back into those old habits, but I have a better understanding now of why I needed that identity, and I'm grateful for the ways it protected me when I was younger. Letting go of that aspect of myself was kind of like grieving the death of a close friend, but beyond the grief was also liberation. Story 42. All I ever wanted to do was act. I made home movies with my friends during school holidays, got into amateur dramatics after high school, and then almost 13 years of 9-to-5 day jobs and the occasional non-paid gig, acting workshops that were never worth the time and money. There are always folks willing to exploit your dreams. A networking week to Hollywood that cost almost €3,000, which was quite an eye-opener. I eventually returned home to South Africa, where the industry is booming. I was 35 and living with my mother, but for the first time was actually doing it. Was going to auditions, doing occasional voice work, got a few commercials, a TV guest slot. In the almost 2 years back home, I did more stuff than the 13 years abroad, but I wasn't enjoying it. Living with my mom was not great. The freelance lifestyle was stressful, and I was aware I was getting older and hadn't been anywhere. So at 37, I went back to the UK with the idea to use it as a base to travel and see the world. A few happy accidents later, and I'm married, working as a postman, and live in a lovely cottage in a lovely seaside village and live a very modest and comfortable life. I'm happy. I'll sometimes shed a tear when I watch a movie from my childhood, but I think that has more to do with nostalgia than the road not taken. I remember that naive, innocent kid with all those years that lay ahead. As I often tell myself, the movies I grew up loving and wanting to make, they don't even make anymore. Story 43. Brazil here. Sorry if there's some grammatical errors. I studied and practiced years to become a filmmaker. I'm at the point where I have another option to make money that's more reliable, but I didn't drop everything yet. I've done lots of work, freelancing and paid jobs, and I've made some money, but it's not reliable when freelancing, and paid jobs were useful but terrible at the same time. I've spent 1 year spending lots of my own money to create an independent experimental feature film, and some people like it, but the results are not as good as could be. It will never be because to make a good movie, you need a good money. That's the reality. Also, the equipment here in Brazil are 5 to 6 times more expensive thanks to our terrible government. Also, the opportunities in this area are rare, and they aren't investing enough money to build a trustable filmmaking industry. So it's very difficult to have opportunities to work as a filmmaker. There is some work, but you cannot maintain yourself. Some people do great money filming marriage and making stream lives, but I hate this. I feel like I died when filming marriages. I prefer other work, and live streams are another field that's not for me. It's just another thing, despite of involving some video background. Now I have some good equipment and knowledge. My father invited me to work with him in a completely different area because he saw me always unhappy, struggling with hard clients, paying much less and lots of times not even paying. I'm very tired of working as freelancer or hired in my area, so I'm going to work with my dad in this new business. It's good because I have an option, but I think I'll keep creating personal things to satisfy the necessity to be active as a filmmaker. Right now, I just hope that this new work will fulfill me. I really need money right now. This pandemic got me totally poor and with low self-esteem. I need something concrete and not a struggle that never paid some results. I feel like I always have this urge to create, but sometimes work consumes your capacity and your talent becomes less evident. But, well, don't want to think too much about it. I think AI will follow the path that life is pointing me to go right now, and let's see what happens. Story 44. Still in the middle of that, but hopefully long-term it works out. I was in medical school and chose to withdraw a second year. I had repeated my first year due to a long stretch of crippling depression and barely getting by in my classes and finally hit rock bottom. Repeated and passed my first year, not well, but passed, and then withdrew a few months into second year. My goal was to be a surgeon, but after everything and my grades, my only real option would have been family medicine, and probably only just, and that was the last thing I wanted to do. It's just boring to me. The biggest issue I had was that I'm pretty smart, by no means a genius, but above average intelligence, but I just couldn't remember the superfine details which would inevitably be the answers, or lead to the answers, on tests. It was just too much information to process or remember or whatever. It was like my brain was a colander, and honestly, a lot of it seemed pretty superfluous to the knowledge you would actually need to be a doctor. The biggest irony of it all is that I can remember random-ass facts really well without even trying. I'd be great on Jeopardy with some studying. Not exactly the skill I would choose to have. So I chose to leave, rather than maybe end up in residency I hated and unalive myself. Seriously. So I ended up working at Home Depot for about a year and a half, needed something to pay the bills, and then got myself into an inside pharmaceutical sales position. I moved from that to another inside pharma job, and I'm currently on that right now. So hopefully long term, I make it good in pharma sales. The problem now is the $400,000 in student loan debt I'm currently in. But my job pays well, and my wife is close to graduating from her Doctor of Physical Therapy program. Story 45. I was hell-bent from a very young age on becoming an actor and would take any opportunity I could. Summer programs, conservatory programs, apprenticeships, got an undergraduate degree, moved to New York City and began auditioning, etc. It was a harsh wake-up call for me. I realized that I'd spent the first few decades of my life in the world of serious theater academia, and I felt like I might as well have been studying an obscure and extinct language or philosophy. Even though I had a few marketable skills, I was one of roughly a jillion people who had both of them and the same vague dream, and they all seemed to live in New York. I thought I would be mentally prepared for that, but in actuality, I spent the better part of a decade battling severe anxiety and depression. I became rapidly jaded as I saw people around me succeed, not because they weren't talented or hardworking, but because many had built-in advantages like money, connections, free housing, etc. I worried that the mental and emotional price I would have to pay in order to pursue a career with so little autonomy and stability couldn't possibly be worth it. I saw actors with great careers fizzle out, get dumped by their agents, and wind up with a family and home that they needed to figure out how to care for, and I was so worried about that happening to me. I knew I needed to totally reframe my dream. Who says you get to have only one dream? And who says that dream always had to be get rich and famous doing the only thing you've ever truly enjoyed? As I've gotten older, I've realized that the idea of success that most Americans hold does not include becoming a valuable member of a community or a hardworking caregiver. If the dream doesn't include riches, it's seen as a type of failure, no matter how wonderful your life is or how valuable your contributions are. Sometimes you have more than one dream, and sometimes your dreams get upgraded or trashed because they aren't serving you. Since reframing/upgrading my dream, I've actually become far more liberated and joyful. I actually create new work with excitement, since the pressure is no longer on that one experience to deliver me to some bigger, bestest thing. I even feel more generous towards myself when I consider acting again, because I truly would be doing so out of love for the art and not some fantasy life. My dream now is, no matter what career I end up spending the longest time working in, to give my work the full attention and honor and respect it deserves. If I end up making shoes, I want to make the best shoes ever and win the respect of other shoemakers. Another dream is to be a respected leader in a community I love, and to steward and protect land that I care about. Story 46. I was a theater kid. From the time I was 10 years old and booked my first community theater gig, it's all I ever wanted to do. I went on a cruise through youth acting classes in the nearest city. I did local commercials and short films before I even went to college. I got a performance scholarship for theater and went on to learn a theater performance degree. Then I finally made the big move to New York City to see the realization of all my talent and hard work. Then came 10 years of mostly misery. I would book something and be at the highest high, and then be waiting tables and auditioning and hating life a few weeks later. I started to notice that all my actor friends who worked consistently made sacrifices that I didn't want to make. They were always broke, they sacrificed romantic relationships and friendships, and they had to be selfish and cutthroat. I knew people who were middle-aged and living in tiny apartments with roommates, still holding on to the dream. I was finally lucky enough to book an off-Broadway show in a pretty well-known space, and I thought that maybe that was going to launch my career to the next level. But it led to just nothing. I was back at square one, and the hustle in me was fading. I had always worked in restaurants to make ends meet, so I told myself that if the opportunity comes along to grow in that industry, I'm not going to turn it down. Within a few years, I became general manager of a nice upscale place on the Upper West Side. Not long after that, I began running the food program for a giant company. COVID has unfortunately sidelined all that for the time being, but I can't tell you how good stability feels. Pushing, putting in long hours, and constantly training gets you ahead in most fields. But with the arts, it's all that and then also the luck factor, which you have no control over. I really miss acting sometimes, but I have to remind myself that I'm not the type of person who's willing to sacrifice everything I have for an industry that consistently showed me no love back. Story 47. I, U.S. male, was an actor from age 16 to 30. Went to theater school in the UK, lived and worked in San Francisco, California, and went to LA for jobs, occasionally other cities and states. I had 2 agents and made a pretty good living making commercials, corporate films, voiceover ads, and on stage. I also always loved tech. Taught myself basic HTML so as a side job I could design websites for small companies at $50 to $100 an hour. Met my soon-to-be wife when I was at a crossroads. Should I move to LA for good or not? She didn't want to. I was on the fence. And I remembered a college acting teacher who once said, if you ever see yourself doing anything other than being an actor, do it, because this is the worst profession in the world. When I was at the crossroads, this was during the first internet bubble. I learned of a communications job at a tech PR agency. Didn't even know what PR was. Still, I knew overall I wanted to make more money. Didn't want to be searching for a job every week, sometimes every day, as an actor. I'd had enough of that. Got hired in PR, still work in tech now, 20 years later. One of the best decisions I made. Have the same wife and 2 kids that I adore. If I stayed acting, needing to travel for long periods of time to go where the gigs are, I might never have been their soccer coach or been to their recitals. And when I retire, I'll go back to acting. Maybe just community theater, maybe to teach kids again. Story 48. I used to dream of being a professional musician. Used to envision myself in a concert hall on stage in the orchestra, playing my favorite pieces and everything. Got my BFA in music and everything. Around the time of my senior year, the reality of what it would actually take to do what I wanted to do started to set in. I'm very much an introvert, and I don't like being away from home, really at all. So the prospect of doing gigs and going to rehearsals on top of having a regular job to pay rent was really daunting, knowing I'd have basically no time to myself for potentially years. Also, most people I knew and went to school with were going to grad school, but I had no money to make that happen, or even any money to travel for auditions. I got a job near where I grew up at a college's music department as an office worker, and that kept me close to my original goal, but even that job had me frequently staying late to set up for rehearsals and concerts. That job had long hours, low pay, and no benefits, and I was barely scraping by, and it was very stressful. As I went on with that job, I eventually realized that that dream and lifestyle wasn't really for me anymore. After 4 years there, I found something else. A Monday to Friday 9 to 5 government job with decent pay and excellent benefits and a 401k. I'm home every day, the same time, and I can spend my evenings and weekends doing what I want to do. I bought my own house about a year ago, and I'm ahead of my bills for the most part. I do miss performing sometimes, but all in all, I'm pretty happy with the way things have turned out. Plus, the classical music scene was already struggling, and now with COVID, I can't even imagine what it's like to try to make a living given that you can't really perform anymore. Story 49. I know someone who had played in bands since his teens and dreamt of being a musician so much that one day he actually quit his job on a whim to chase it. For 2 years, he did the lot. He moved to Manchester to share a house with his band. They played up and down the country and abroad, met with labels, and hung out with all the big names on the way. However, despite getting a solid following, they just didn't quite make it, and it became far too financially troublesome to continue doing it. He always said if he could make €300 a week, then it'd be more than enough for him. However, some months would be great and others would be completely dead. Eventually, after waking up on someone's sofa and realizing he didn't have a home or anything really to his name, he decided to call it quits and come back. He's now working with me at a large format print firm. It's a relaxed environment that allows us all to talk crap, have a laugh, listen to tunes, and generally make some very comfortable living without much worry at all. However, every time he reflects back on his times being in a band, you can see a little glow in his eyes, and his personality lights up more than normal. He says he's okay with how everything happened, and he enjoyed the experience, but I can tell that he's gutted that his dream didn't properly materialize, and that day-to-day life now isn't exactly what he imagined or wanted. I have many regrets about life decisions, but I never really had a dream to pursue, so I'm more or less at peace with taking each day as it comes. Him, however, I genuinely feel sorry for, because being so close to something that makes you happy and it being so unattainable must be heartbreaking. Story 50. I wanted to be an animator and cartoonist. I wanted to create my own graphic novel and/or animated film. I was told many times that I couldn't afford a fair school to learn how to animate, and I don't really learn from online tutorials and things, so I had to take a class for it if I wanted to learn. I changed my dreams of a graphic novel to just a novel, since I'm not an awful writer. I eventually stopped drawing because after 13 years of barely improving at all, my frustration and misery at my inability to improve overcame any desire to continue or joy gained from it. I began to hate it, And in school, I was told many times that I should get out of design because I simply wasn't good at it. I had the technical skills, but not the creativity for it, and I would not be successful outside very niche areas. I ended up staying in the arts with graphic design and getting a job in my field before college graduation. I then got a much better stay-at-home job. Then 2020 hit. That job completely dried up, and now I'm unemployed and struggling to find anything I'm physically capable of doing. Design firms will not hire me for the exact reasons I was told in college. My technical skills are good, but creativity and innovation are terrible. My creative career has been largely the fast food of design, cheap, simplistic, satisfying enough, and overwhelmingly purchased by people who simply don't care or can't afford better, but also not a good representation of a business. It's been largely technical design, custom forms and things, with primarily basic ads at the most recent one. Nobody hires designers for that. Back in the late noughties, I was on DeviantArt and tried to improve. I did get better, but lacked foundations necessary to get where I wanted. There were other artists there at the same time who were around my skill level. Over time, many of them who I recognized their names became successful. One is an animator, one does comic book covers, one does a successful webcomic, etc. In me, I lost my design job and have no hopes of getting another. I stagnated during college artistically. I see artists half my age on Twitter who outdo me immensely all the time. My utter failure at my dream, partially because of abandoning it and partially because of money, is one of my major wanting to self-unalive thought triggers and factors. I hate myself because I can't learn like everyone else. I have to be taught things. I hate that I can't make my hands do what I need them to do. I hate that I can't draw without crying. I hate that I can't understand perspective when it comes to characters, that I can't draw dynamic poses, that my art has always been stiff and uninteresting. I hate that I spent half my life wanting and fighting for it, and now it's over, and all I have to show for it is unemployment and no hope. I regret my decision. I should have taken loans and applied to a proper school. I shouldn't have abandoned my dreams for stability because stability ended up with me here, unstable, broke, unemployed, facing the loss of everything. And I didn't even get to brush against my dreams. Story 51. I'm an accomplished country music singer. When I was 22, I started winning talent contests with ease and was contemplating moving to Nashville to pursue it as a career. My wife and I had been married about a year, and she's a very practical person, and we approached it together with a non-emotional pro-con process. We researched and found that there were 2 Nashville songwriters that lived in our area about half the year. We went and I played for them and we had a long discussion. They were not trying to lean us one way or the other. They told me I was plenty good enough to move to Nashville and give it a go. However, they laid out the sacrifices and what life would be like if we did so. That would have to work full-time as well as play in bars most nights for a long time and work to make the right connections. That I would need to first become a great songwriter, which comes easy to me, and prove to labels that I'm not just a singer. They were also great about telling me that there were thousands of me there and were complimentary in that there were probably only 100 or so as good as I was, but still there would be competition, of course. Then, if all went well and I caught a break or someone's eye or ear and was signed, that the financial side of the industry is brutal, and so you have to be on the road most of the year just to make ends meet, and usually it does not end well for most artists. Only the best of the best hit it big and make good money. They told us how artists like Dierks Bentley for years was on the road nearly 300 days a year. We both decided that having a great marriage and a solid foundation for our children was way more important than fame and fortune. To me, it was an easy decision based on that. So, I got a degree in marketing and ended up starting my own ad agency. Sold out of that one years ago and now have another one I started. Love my life and my pretty normal suburban life. However, I did not just give up the dream. When I was about 30, I started a band, and after years of practice and finding talented members, we have opened for artists such as Kansas, Kelsey Ballerini, Sawyer Brown, Kelly Pickler, Mark Willis, Eric Pasley, Ricochet, and more. We've also played in stadiums for July 4th celebrations with close to 20,000 people, all within only a few hours driving from my home. Now, it took years of playing weekends in bars and festivals and all those small gigs to be good enough to earn those larger ones, but I found a way to stand on a level playing field with Nashville talent and easily held our own, if not outperformed them. So our decision, though it's not always been easy, has been a great one. Story 52. When I was 18, I decided I wanted to be a high school guidance counselor. I worked my butt off for 7 years, getting a dual major in a teachable field plus psychology, as well as post-bac studies to get my teaching degree. Come to find, I don't like it. The insane levels of bureaucracy, the double standards, the nepotism, the insane parents, the disrespectful kids, the cliques among staff, the long hours of just marking and prep. And this was all before it was compounded by COVID. When I got laid off due to lockdowns, I came to realize I was happier away from the schools. Sure, there were students I met that were and will likely grow up to be some wonderful, intelligent people. Not a day goes by since I was laid off that I don't wonder how some of them are doing, especially since more than one student has confided in me about tense or unfavorable living situations. But between my untreated mental health issues, doctor won't take them seriously, that's another matter entirely, the increased stress load on teachers since COVID, and realizing that this might not be the right career path for me, I've decided not to turn back. Problem is, as comfortable as I am now, I have no idea what I want to do with my life, and working retail at a local game store selling board games, Magic and D&D products isn't going to get me where I want in life. Curiously, I'm less stressed and more happy now than before, so I don't know what that says about me. Story 53. I probably think about this question once a day, and fair warning, I don't post to Reddit often, so I might not be the most gripping post to read, but I feel like I might as well use this opportunity to get some feelings off my chest. I've wanted to compose film scores since I was probably 13. I've always felt sort of special when writing music. Performing was cool too, but I'm not the strongest performer and I'm not great looking. I get extremely self-critical after performances, so I got disillusioned with that side of it. For me, the magic feelings always came out when I wrote something down and it was performed by others. I was never a popular kid in school, but every once in a while I'd feel important or sexy when music was involved. I went through music college, got my degree in music theory/composition, and had an amazing time, honestly. I did well and even won some competitions, got commissioned to write a few times, and I kept telling myself that I was really special. I idolized the thought of winning an Academy Award for Best Original Film Score one day. While all these happy-go-lucky feelings were happening, I also realized that in many ways I was not living healthy. In fact, I was disgusting. I ate like crap, like I'd starve myself all day, and then eat a high-octane smorgasbord of fast food, energy drinks, and alcohol at 1 in the morning. I lived in a dirty apartment that I didn't take good care of with a bunch of other dudes. I had zero money. My sleeping habits were non-existent. I didn't clean myself well or often. I never worked out. Kind of all the worst parts of college and none of the good. I started getting heart palpitations around my 6th year of being at the university because of my lifestyle. My poor girlfriend, now wife, stuck by me this whole time, by the way. I consider myself very lucky that she didn't find me repulsive. Anyway, I get the stupid $200,000 piece of paper that I was supposed to get, and then I was like, okay, now just a few more years of poverty and crushing debt, and then I'll make it in the LA film circuit. I had fully accepted, by the way, that I was most likely going to fail miserably. Even though I was all right at composing in my tiny-ass community, I was not profound beyond belief or highly prolific or anything. I had sort of become accustomed to the idea that I'd be eating/living off my wife's income while I tried desperately to make it big in the Hollywood film industry. So one day, right before I'm about to graduate, my sister calls and says that there's an analyst job opening at a company she works at. Non-music job, to be clear. She knows I have no plan or money. I ask how much it pays, and she says it starts at $40K a year plus benefits. Holy crap, that's a lot of money. I had never had more than $1,000 in my bank account in my entire life. Maybe, I thought, I could save up some dough, pay off some debt, and then jump back into the music world in a few years. You know, like a sabbatical type of deal. Just to get myself some burnable cash for my dream of living in a crap hole and pretending that I'm important all day. I take the job. I actually enjoy it a lot. My wife and I no longer need roommates to pay the rent. We turn the heat on when it's cold. I eat cool things at a restaurant every once in a while. We got a effing ping pong table and a smart TV. I moved up in the company a bit, and then I started making enough to buy a functioning car made within the last 2 decades. My wife received some money from a passed away relative, and we've been saving enough to put a down payment on an effing house. I live in a house. Smaller town with too many Trump supporters, but still. And here's the best part. I write music whenever I want to now. It isn't a stressful source of income, but a passion that I just happen to do for my soul's benefit at my leisure, and sometimes to justify the exorbitant amount of cost it took to get a degree in it. But still, I do feel guilty for being comfortable instead of being a struggling artist sometimes, and who knows, it may be in the future for me to go back in the music world, but I can definitely say that, especially after seeing how tough it's been on some of my old school mates with COVID this year, I feel very lucky to have a job and a savings account. Even if it isn't my passion all day every day, I'm doing this right now and I'm happy and healthy. I don't regret trying a regular job at all. I know that I'm in an extremely privileged situation, though, and not everyone can just get a job like this. I'm just saying that if you have a chance to try out the regular job life after you've pursued a passion of yours for a while, it's okay to say yes. If you end up hating the regular job life, then quit and pursue the dream again. You aren't stuck being at a regular job if you aren't afraid to live humbly. You can always go back, and it's okay to take long breaks from your passion projects too. That might be what I'm doing right now, just taking a break until I'm ready to dive back in. I probably will not get an Oscar for Best Original Film Score, but that doesn't mean I'm a failure as a composer. The joy of art is in the doing, and fortunately, I can still do the things I love. Story 54. I always wanted to rap. In school, nobody could beat me in a battle. I was pretty decent at it too. It was normal for me to get asked to freestyle, and even won money in battles against adults. I wanted to bring something interesting to the table. I didn't rap about drugs or money, but told stories, and was pretty decent at making rhyme schemes that also played with the head, and I figured if so many of my idols could tell their stories, mine was different. I don't mean to sound cocky here, but if there was a room full of rappers, I always came out on top in terms of flow, and that surprised people because I don't look like an archetypical rapper. I'm a fat kid from Long Island who you'd assume lived a great life, but my past was littered with shelters, psychosocial trauma, anger, grappling with autism, and never truly being accepted. I could tell you countless stories that you wouldn't believe, and it would take even longer to explain it all to you. And I wanted to put it all on paper for the world to see it. But rap was changing, and my life was changing. I've since lost interest in the industry and my old peers. Most of them are on hard drugs or in prison now, and I needed a solid plan to not repeat the mistakes of the people around me. I dropped out of school, got my GED, and I'm one term away from graduating with a bachelor's in computer science and no debt. Here's the thing, when you study something long enough, you also realize you hate it. I've gotten really interested in languages and have a knack for picking them up. The only thing I really want to do is get proficient enough in other languages that I could feasibly teach English, but at the same time, I need time and probably am going to finish my degree and work developing software or debugging while I work out a solid plan. Fact is, I have no idea if that's going to happen. My life isn't exactly comfortable, but it never has been. A lot of you on here are saying things like, I traveled in my 20s, I found myself, I could have been a doctor. None of that was on the table for me, and the only thing I want to do is see the world and teach people a little of what I know while I learn more. Story 55. I went to school for music, specifically music performance. I wanted nothing more in life than to get to perform for people. After college, I was in 3 different touring bands for about 6 years. I got to play shows in about 20 states across the US. I didn't have any other backup plan. This was what I wanted for so long. While the idea of just getting to play in a band and travel the country seems incredible on the outside, there's a lot of other things about the job that can really wear you down. The pay is inconsistent. Some weeks I could make $800 from just 2 shows, about 8 to 9 hours of actual playing. Sometimes I didn't get paid for 2 weeks. It all depends on where you play and what you're playing for, and this isn't really something you could stand in the unemployment line for. Travel is dangerous. I can't even count how many times we had a major scare while driving from one gig to another. I've also heard some really bad stories of bands getting in car accidents on the road and getting horribly injured or worse. Having something like that happen while you're hundreds of miles away from home was always a big fear of mine. Sometimes your bandmates aren't as trustworthy as you once thought. Sometimes they get a power rush and they think they can boss you around. Sometimes they steal band money, and sometimes you find out that they're a predator. Not saying that bands are full of predators, just speaking from my experience. The music you write better be so original and fresh for you to make any sort of progress. If you know anything about writing music, that's way easier said than done. If not, no one will give a crap about you. People you meet at shows treat you differently. It's hard to explain. A lot of the time, people put you on this pedestal because they think you're the coolest person for being in a band. A select few have even thought I was famous just because we traveled. But because of this, you're never viewed as a person, just as an object. Like I said, it's hard to explain, but one thing remains consistent in everyone you meet. Everyone you meet at shows is either tipsy or drunk. It gets old. Speaking of drinking, the stress of it all turned me into an alcoholic. So much so that I couldn't start a show unless I had a 3 to 4 shot buzz going. Combine that with heavily drinking during the show, and I was near blackout by our last set almost every show. I got drunk on my off days too, mostly by myself. That went on for about a year. I had a lot of embarrassing and regretful moments while drunk. Anyone who's been an alcoholic before knows exactly what I'm talking about. After only 6 years of it, I couldn't take it anymore. I left the scene late in 2019 and got a job at a screen printing company for which I had no experience. I gained the knowledge of the job quick, and within the year, I'm going to be promoted to floor manager of the company, and I'm making consistent pay. I also stopped drinking. As of today, I'm 457 days sober. Every now and then I miss it, but then I remember what was and how much better everything is now. Story 56. Acting, general blanket term, as my journey will indicate. Performing arts may be a more suiting descriptor. 17 years later, at 38 years old, I'm still working in the industry, though around 90% of my classmates/friends from the conservatory have long since moved on, most before the 10-year mark. I believe I have some degree of insight to offer to this conversation. 90% may sound like an alarming drop-off rate. Honestly, it might be higher. Bear in mind, this is a cross-section of individuals with significant dedication to the craft. Enough to be accepted into, by audition, and persevere a rigorous conservatory performing arts training program. These aren't folks hot off the Greyhound who had never once been in a play or on stage in any capacity in their entire lives, thinking they were about to be a movie star. The latter exist in hordes. These folks I'm referring to were lifelong, multi-talented artists up until leaving the industry, most before turning 30. To top it off, we were studying in Los Angeles. We were already there, literally. Imagine showing up to a job interview for an engineering opportunity, your degree and internship credentials in hand. Seated next to you is someone who has never once consumed literature or instruction in engineering. Zero. You both have equal chance at landing the job. About 1%. Welcome to acting. I had an extensive background in music, choral singing, which afforded me a unique skill set to lean on. After graduation, I went from stage acting to screen acting to live event/TV hosting to voiceover. Voiceover is now my primary, kind of where I landed. Not coincidentally, it's been the easiest subpath for me. In the arts, you go where the jobs take you, if you can even get them. This may sound counter to an artist's will, a tough pill to swallow. I grinded without pause for 10 years in the industry before working a professional union contract as a principal performer. Every aspiring artist should ask him or herself if they're willing to do the same. Are you willing to bartend well into your mid-30s while calling yourself an actor? No shame in that at all, but an honest and direct reflection. There was a young girl who dropped out of our conservatory class after day one. I distinctly recall our instruction commenting with one word: good. 17 years later, I fully understand the instructor's sentiment. It's good that the student didn't waste her time and hours with a dream she wasn't legitimately dedicated to. Many folks I expected to see move on from the industry, those who simply wanted to be famous with no concrete drive, passion, or talent. The sad reality was seeing those close friends, whom I considered exceptionally dedicated and talented, begin to move on. It is at this stage you begin to realize how close you are to the same fate. At this crossroad, one either doubles down or leaves it all behind, a memory of what was and what could have been. Of the countless colleagues who gave up pursuing their dream, essentially all are in a more stable, content place with no regrets to their decision. Their lives are better, yes. Fulfilled? Well, that's another story. My best friend of almost 20 years gave up his dream and literally moved home at 37 years old, 1 month ago. LA to SC. The pandemic accelerated what was perhaps an inevitable certainty. He was one of the special ones. One with insane natural gifts. He never once worked a professional union contract. This is the harsh reality, for him and me. It cannot be that you want to do it. One must have to do it. There cannot be anything else you could possibly do. Otherwise, honestly, just move home now. I apologize if my comment comes across as self-serving or aggrandizing. All my friends have left. It's not a sub-story. I'm happy doing my thing, and I find ways to do it better with each passing year. And with each passing year, less imposter syndrome exists in me. I'm happy knowing that my friends, who I care about, are now in a better place. It's not a unique tale. It's the nature of the biz. Story 57. The original dream for me. Get married, have kids, be a professional musician, live happily ever after. Married my high school sweetheart at 20 years old. Went to college for piano and harp music. Got my degree. Had 2 kids. Hands down the best part of the original dream. Played in a few orchestras, though they were mostly volunteer orchestras and didn't pay. Turns out that while there are not very many harpists, the paid positions are few and far between and highly competitive, and the few who are the best are able to snag multiple positions. No bad feelings toward them. They should be the ones paid for their talent and hard work. I was good, but not the best, so I played mostly at a volunteer level, and was paid for the odd wedding/tea/luncheon/fundraiser event now and then. Taught piano and harp lessons to make a little money, though husband was the main breadwinner. Fast forward a few years. Dream marriage is in shambles and falls apart. Ex won't leave me any custody of the kids unless I can find a job that pays a living wage, which music is not providing, and I start looking. I clean houses, I wait tables, I donate plasma, then I apply for the U.S. Postal Service, of all places, as a city carrier assistant. They offer medical, dental, retirement, and paid leave, and start pay at the same amount that X is making at his current job. I'm in. The first 2.5 years were rough, as the schedule was not consistent, and the hours could be brutal. Some weeks were 35 hours, some were 85, and everywhere in between. My family helped with the kids when days were particularly long, but I made decent money. I had to quit the orchestras I was part of since I couldn't be depended on to make rehearsals, and I had to stop teaching private lessons as well. I learned to work in snow and rain and heat, and how to deal with lazy people and pick up their slack, because I needed this job to be able to have my kids. I worked hard, and I was proud of it. These days, I'm not a carrier assistant anymore. I have my own route. My schedule is much more reliable. If I choose to only work 40 hours a week, I can, and if I want overtime, I can sign up for it. They pay time and a half for anything over 8 hours in a day, and double time for anything over 10 hours in a day. I was able to find a house to live in that's on my route, so the people I deliver to are not just my customers, they're my neighbors. I walk about 12 miles a day to deliver the mail, so I stay decently in shape, and I get to have conversations with people and pet their dogs. One of my customers even replaced the radiator in my car a few months back, and I'll be giving him my business for any future repairs I need. There are some days that the weather is terrible and my job is really hard, but for every terrible day, there's a gorgeous spring or fall day that I literally look at people I see and say, can you believe they're paying me to be out here? Despite COVID this year, despite the forest fires that made it difficult to be outside, and despite terrible politics surrounding the post office, I can honestly say that a solid 90% of the time, I really do enjoy my job. At least enough that I don't dread going to work. I have 50-50 custody of my kids, as I know they need their dad just as much as they need their mom, and his ability as a father was never in question. The time I get to have with them is a little more special and less taken for granted than it would be if they were with me all the time, and I'm also able to have time to myself when they're with their dad. I'm able to do music now as a hobby and just for the fun of it, instead of having the pressure of an income attached to it. And I honestly enjoy it more now than when it was my job. If I find something I'm interested in, I find ways to learn about it or take part. Getting a telescope for astronomy, or taking jiu-jitsu classes, or baking things at home. None of it has the pressure or monotony of being a job. It's all purely for the fun of it. I've also been dating someone for 2 years now, who has met and exceeded every single expectation or hope I could have ever had in a partner. I don't know if we'll ever get married, but I'm not worried about it. I know that happiness in a relationship doesn't magically appear with a wedding ring, and I'm content with what we have. He loves my kids and they love him. And honestly, I can say that every part of my life is better for him being a part of it. I hope he feels the same way, and I try to do what I can for him so that he does. Oh, and we met 4.5 years ago, while waiting for our interviews, at the post office. Story 58. I did this, and I do not regret my decision at all. I completed my bachelor's in pure mathematics, and I'm currently in grad school for math. I just finished and passed my qual exams this winter. I work as a software engineer in a really cool, super high-paying niche field. I don't want to say which one because it's a small field and I don't want to identify myself. Just recently, I was looking at a job ad for a job in my field, and it made me smile. Competitive base salary between $150K and $210K, but we're looking at candidates up to $250K. Attractive equity, solid benefits package, work 100% remotely. Originally, I started college with a double major in mathematics and fine arts. I loved art and painting, and I loved math and couldn't decide. So I enrolled in an expensive art school and took math coursework on the side at another school, since the math curriculum at the art school was weak. My art school cost almost $50K a year. Luckily, I had lots of scholarships for art awards, but even after applying those, it was ridiculously expensive. Art school was weird. My first week, I asked a fellow classmate why there was black and white to video video playing in the library on a loop of a man jacking off. I said, "Why is there adult content playing on a loop in the library?" And she haughtily replied, "It's not adult content, it's daddyism." One of my classmates' thesis consisted of him smearing clay on a blank wall and screaming. One time, a guy came to speak at the school and tickets sold out. It was packed. I attended because there was big hubbub about him coming. I didn't know much about his books or what his talk would be about, aside from that it had something to do with environmentalism. He was a very chubby man with messy curly hair and a pastel pink knit sweater, and his entire talk essentially consisted of calmly calling for acts of violence. One student asked him, "What book would you give to a senator or a head of a corporation?" And he answered, "A book that explodes." I made very few friends at that school, and it was extremely stressful for me because the students there were extremely touchy. Public freakouts and meltdowns were common over small things. There were some chill people, but there was also a lot of mental health problems. The thing that finally convinced me to leave was that I started becoming friends with alumni from the school, and I saw how their lives were. It wasn't the fact that they didn't make a lot of money that bothered me. A few of them were even somewhat successful. I became buddies with an older Vietnamese dude who studied ceramics there, and he owned a bunch of Vietnamese restaurants and food carts and seemed to be pulling a pretty good hustle. And I knew someone else from a different art school who was the head of some government arts program and married to a dentist, and they were both killing it and living like gods. The problem was that everyone I talked to kept telling me the same thing, that they no longer have time for art because they work long hours bartending or whatever else. Not only did none of them actually make a living off of their art, but they were so busy in their other careers that they didn't even have the time or energy to make anything for themselves. I also heard a lot that art school killed their love of art. All of the critiquing and overanalyzing in politics and neuroticism of the environment and the pressure to churn 5 pieces out a week, every week, only to have it picked apart, and the debt burden just took all the joy out of creating something. I knew what they meant, and I was starting to feel it too. I only ever met one person who graduated there who was still producing. Last time I saw her, she lives in a studio apartment with 2 other people, but she has a gallery she shares with a friend and scrapes by bartending. I always make sure to support her because I love her work and respect that she's trying to make it. I dropped out of art school after just 2 quarters and never looked back. Luckily for me, I had another big love and passion in my life: mathematics. I had no idea what I could or wanted to do with math at the time. Oddly enough, I never really cared much about money, and I have never really made decisions for practical purposes. But I was just lucky that the thing I loved the most happened to lead me somewhere stable and lucrative. I definitely do not regret dropping out of art school. I guess I don't really regret attending it either, since I only attended 2 terms and I was only halfway enrolled, so I could take math classes at another school. It didn't cost me all that much. It was such a weird world to witness, so I just chalked the cost up to unique life experiences. I still paint. Story 59. I wanted to be a journalist. I won't say in which sector due to anonymity reasons, but it was a very, very competitive one. I knew I had the talent, and I don't mean that to sound arrogant. I had great grades, was advised to enter writing competitions in my field by lecturers because I was a shoo-in, etc. I interned at well-known magazines and freelanced for other big-name publications, but getting a paid, full-time job seemed impossible. I got really close a few times. I had 2 job offers that fell through for reasons outside of my control. I also hated living in London, and that's where 90% of the industry jobs are in the UK. I moved to a smaller city with my now husband and tried freelancing full-time, but I couldn't make ends meet. I can write, but I just didn't know how to market myself at the time, and was relying on blind pitching, which occasionally landed, and low-paid content and copywriting jobs. Think clickbait. Eventually, I had enough and decided to see what else I could do with my writing skills. At that moment, if I believed in fate, I'd say it was fate. I saw a job ad for a company I'd never heard of in my town that they were searching for a copywriter/PR person with journalism experience. I applied and surprised myself by landing the role. I've been there for 2 years now as a copywriter. I enjoy it because I get to be creative and write for a living, while still having stability. I've also learned a huge amount of new skills, especially around marketing and social media. I still sometimes miss journalism. My contract means I can't freelance while working for this company, and it's especially hard when I have a great pitch idea and know I can't act on it. I think I'd like to move up the ranks in my current company and become a creative director, or go back to working for myself someday as a journalist, copywriter, using the new skills I've learned in this role. Copywriting has also made me realize I'd like to give writing a novel a go. which I'm not sure would have happened had I stayed on the journalism path. Story 60. I'm in the middle of this dilemma, and any insight from anyone can help. But I basically graduated with a film degree in 2019 and moved back home. I love cinema and movies and am fascinated with how they're made, and I have ideas of my own, but I've always found it hard to motivate myself to make my projects. Since graduation, I've moved back home and took crappy retail jobs until the pandemic hit and I was fired. However, I found myself in a position with a fantastic company that's highly sought over in the city I live in. It's full-time with great pay, consistent work, great work environment, and eventually benefits and many perks. It's a fantastic company. However, I'm in the process of deciding to move to Austin, Texas, with friends from college who are also into filmmaking in hopes of pursuing that dream of mine. I'm split because I don't know if I'm just lazy or if I'm uninspired or intimidated by the film industry, but I don't work on it in my spare time. I waste a lot of that time with other things, nothing productive, and I'm not questioning my passion in film, but I'm thinking if it's the right decision to leave such a good job to chase the dream I'm feeling iffy about. I love cinema, and I'd love to get a camera back in my hand, but I don't think it's something I need like many other filmmakers feel. I'm getting comfortable with this new job and the security it will give me, but I don't know if that's good or not, or if I'm a failure for giving up on my dream that I've already invested so much into. I'm hoping that by putting in time at the company and leaving on good terms will give me this safety net that if things don't work out in Austin and I end up back here, I'll have at least some security if they take me back. However, one thing I can say is that most of the people I work with are older and have families, and I look at the comfort they have. I'm sure they all had big dreams to do something, but of course, not everyone can achieve their dreams, and they found themselves in a good job, in a nice town, with a family that give me peace of mind that even if my dream is never fulfilled, I'll still be able to find happiness. Story 61. I was living my dream. Worked as a national sales manager, which doesn't sound much, but I worked my way up from a sales admin, so I felt I had been vindicated in my abilities and was being generously rewarded for meeting targets. $16K bonus 1 year. Customers loved me, I loved them, I loved my company car, I loved my job, and then I got bipolar. Things declined in my job pretty rapidly. One of my colleagues ratted on me to HR for driving aggressively after they took a lift home with me. No one else in the car complained. And then I had a $36K sale go legal as the item was delivered damaged, but not able to be repaired. I became very much on HR's radar, and the manager was asking me to draft responses to the customer solicitor, and then shooting me down for not writing the letter correctly, and then doing it herself because she was formerly a legal secretary, so it felt like she was setting me up for the fall. I would stare at my laptop and not be able to concentrate enough to achieve anything. My head felt like 1,000 people shouting at me, and I couldn't deal with customers and their bullcrap. I got signed off work by my doc, and I realized looking back now, I was crashing out of a huge hypomaniac episode and into a bipolar depression. I was crushed and broken. One day during my time off work, my wife and I met some friends, and I was so anxious I had to squat down and have mini anxiety attacks every 5 minutes, so we left. On the walk home, my wife suggested quitting my job and working out the next step after, and it felt like a weight had lifted. So I quit after using up a bit more sick pay. Not gonna lie, it was tough. I've gone into a job in the same industry now, but installing rather than selling. Looks like they want me to move back into sales now that I understand the product in and out. It's been a very humbling experience, and it's taken 18 months to get where I am now. I'm glad I made the change rather than trying to white-knuckle my way through a job I was unable to perform. In time, I will realize that it was the best thing I ever did, but the change has not been easy. Story 62. I feel good. I'm quite a snappy writer and have a lot of pop culture, and I watch movies like a banshee. So when I was a teenager, I was like, oh, I'll be a writer/movie reviewer and waitress on the side. But once I realized how healthcare works and that I grew up super poor and I need a safety net, that felt like a risk I couldn't take. I also fancied myself a PhD in philosophy with a master's in library science, working at a college library and adjunct teaching, but I graduated with my bachelor's in the 2007 recession and dropped out of library science school once I realized I would have to move to wherever jobs were as a philosopher librarian, and I wanted more stability than that. I don't regret at all not being a philosopher. With the rise in 40-minute YouTube video essays on why men in black is a critique of xenophobia or whatever, movie journalism is a job I could have easily seen working out for me despite the seeming risk. But being self employed is too much an anxiety trigger for someone who grew up in poverty, so I just make a modest salary teaching ESL at a Tier 1 school. It's not my dream on paper, but it feels good day to day, and if I get my crap together, I can always write about movies during the summer. I think managing the realities of the day to day world and assessing how they'll make you feel, i.e., not having healthcare, makes me feel more unpleasant than giving up my dream does, is an ongoing process of critical day to day reflection and looking inward, not so much a one-off moment of giving up on your dream. I thought I wanted to be a philosophy prof, but the reality of having to be available to move literally anywhere made that dream look crappy real quick. You don't know the mechanism of the real world / economy / the discipline of your dream when you dream it up. That takes practice and experience, and the real world of it might be nothing like your dream. Teaching cute little kiddos how to speak English feels 100 times better in the day-to-day than grading privileged philosophy 101 papers ever would. But the idea of a philosophy prof was way more romantic to my teenage brain than just being a standard teacher is. It takes being an adult to figure out which dreams actually suck in practice, and on the flip side, which things you previously wrote off are absolute joys. Story 63. On again, off again pilot here. I graduated high school in 2000. My friend said, let's go to this really good college that has a flying program. Went, then 9/11 happened. Jobs dried up, switched majors, and joined the military part-time to help pay for college. Deployed a few times and graduated college. Took out a huge loan to finally finish my flight ratings. Graduated from flight school 2008, just as the financial crisis hit. I struggled as a part-time flight instructor for over 3 years. One day, this great federal government job opens up, non-flying, and the temptation of guaranteed paychecks seduced me and I moved. Bought a place and gave up on my flying career forever. 2018, airlines are struggling to find pilots. Giving hiring bonuses, unheard of in my instructing days, got me thinking, is it my time? I quit my job and sold my place and took a job with a regional carrier for a major airline. Hardest decision, hardest transition I ever made in my life. 2020, coronavirus hits. Regional carrier loses contact from major carrier, and now I'm unemployed at 39 years old. Got to live my dream for just over a year, but I'm living on savings, working odd jobs, etc. At times, I wish I would have stuck with the stability. The longer the job market drags on, the more I miss it.